You're listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Radio Hour podcast. I'm your host, Justin Beahm. Today's episode has a couple of really special guests, Thommy Hutson and Mark Alan Miller. They're the gentlemen behind the Doc of Chucky, which just landed on Shudder. You'll know the name Thommy Hutson from his previous documentary work. He has certainly been delving deep into franchises for a long time, dating back to the Never Sleep Again documentary on the Nightmare on Elm Street films, Crystal Lake Memories on Friday the 13th. He was also part of More Brains, which was on Return of the Living Dead, and then on to Scream, which he was part of Scream: The Inside Story in 2011. So Thommy is well-traveled when it comes to this kind of territory, and the presentation with his productions is always absolutely top-notch. Mark Alan Miller, who is Tommy's co-pilot on this Doc of Chucky, is also well-versed in the documentary background, having done special features and a number of standalone pieces, and most notable recently for his, this thing is exploding. His publishing imprint is called Encyclopolis, which has only been around a few years, but is already making huge headway in the realm of books with a lot of fiction, nonfiction. They're doing novelizations from indie films onto treasured genre classics. Really outstanding stuff from Mark and his publishing label, Encyclopolis. So we have a lot to cover on this episode. Of course, we're going to dive deep on the Doc of Chucky. We're also going to get into Tommy's re-released book, Never Sleep Again, which is about the making of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Thommy and I have known each other for a long time, and I remember when he was just getting the wheels moving on this Nightmare on Elm Street book, and we were having long conversations about best approach and where he could take it to pitch it in terms of finding a home for it. The book did have an initial short run with a small publisher before finding its current home with this re-released edition. That's currently available on Amazon. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can get directly to it, but I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's really cool to have these conversations with fellow documentarians because we often are like ships in the night. It's funny, when I go to conventions like I was at Chiller in New Jersey a few weeks ago, inevitably, I approach a booth for some label, and I meet someone who's out there doing the same thing I am, but we never have reason, I guess, to really bump into each other too much. It's not like there's like a United Nations of special features creators, because there really aren't that many of us out there that do this stuff, and it's always exciting when I meet someone new, and exciting to have conversations like the one you're going to hear on the episode here today with Thommy and Mark, where the three of us have done a lot of diverse traveling in this realm and shared experiences and challenges and things, which makes for a richer conversation. And beyond that, we have the shared Chucky experience, because I produced all the special feature stuff on Shout Factory's run of Child's Play and Chucky films that came out over the last couple of years. It's kind of interesting because really a portion of that timeline, when I was out there trying to hustle this, they being Thommy and Mark, they were out doing the same thing. And I ran into that a few times because I wasn't aware of Doc of Chucky happening directly, but I did have a few people that I reached out to say, didn't I already do this? Or I thought I already had this scheduled. And I was like, oh, there must be something else going on, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was. Kind of cool, though, that we got the shared Chucky experience at around the same time. And while my releases, my work on those discs is, it's limited because it's working with special feature budgets and time constraints and all of that. I'm very proud of everything that came out of that experience. I was surprised each time a new 3, I think at a time, films got brought to me from the Shout team. But it was a real joy to be part of, and I met lots of wonderful people. And these guys were out there with real money. They had Shudder behind them and the luxury of time, which is something that the special feature world doesn't usually offer in excess. So it fills in all the blanks that you may have been missing on those 4K releases from Shout and puts them all into one place. And I really think that the pace that the doc moves at, you kind of lose yourself as you start watching. And yes, it is long because it has to be. There's so much territory to cover there. It doesn't get into the TV series. Just a note on Doc of Chucky. It's just about the films, but there's so many there and so many people. They really left pretty much no stone unturned. And we're going to get into all of that as well as Tommy's book, like I mentioned. I just finished the audiobook on the new memoir, From Here to the Great Unknown, which is from Lisa Marie Presley and her daughter Riley Keough. It's really an incredible book. It's so intimate and heartbreaking, haunting, and revealing. Not just about Lisa Marie's life, but also about Riley's, because in 2022, not long before her passing, Lisa Marie had asked Riley to help her finish a memoir that she had been working on for a number of years. Lisa Marie had been making these audio recordings for use in a book about her life and was having a hard time bringing it all together. So Riley started picking up the pieces on that. And then, of course, sadly, Lisa Marie passed. And in tribute to her mom, Riley finished the project. And so it became an interesting, very unique kind of memoir in that it is the story of Lisa Marie. It's also the story of Riley growing up with Lisa Marie as a mom and in this insane world of Elvis Presley that just has this unyielding momentum, never slows down. In fact, there's a new documentary that just landed on Netflix about the story. Well, it's a bit about Elvis's career as a whole, but it primarily focuses on the 68 comeback special. It's an hour and a half long. It's kind of a snapshot. For anyone who's been a real avid reader on the world of Elvis, it's not going to reveal anything new to you, but it is really charming how they present the story of that night, that presentation, and how important that was to Elvis at that moment. So that's just an example. I mean, this stuff never slows down with Elvis, and the world of Lisa Marie never slowed down. And Riley's world has been wild as well. Riley's a noted filmmaker and actress. Her Sasquatch Sunset that she was in and also was producer on came out, I think it was earlier this year, and it is a singular experience, that movie. I knew going into it that it was supposed to be something a little bit different, but man, it's really almost like a National Geographic following a family of bears in a year of their life kind of thing. But it's Sasquatches, and it's completely crazy. It has some way over-the-top moments that are hilarious. It also has some really touching elements to it, and all beautifully shot. I mean, the cinematography on that picture is just amazing. So if you haven't seen Sasquatch Sunset, definitely check it out. But you might know Riley also from her other acting and producing endeavors. She's always out there in the fringe. She's very into outside the box, unique films and projects, and I just admire the hell out of her. I'm going to say, though, that with From Here to the Great Unknown, the new book, the way to experience it is through the audiobook. The reason why is because first it's narrated by Julia Roberts, and she does a tremendous job. It's co-narrated by Riley, who serves as her own voice throughout the entire thing. And then, incredibly, they include the audio clips of many of those recordings that Lisa Marie had been doing privately. So you can read the book in print, but that's only going to give you a snapshot of the full perspective on this. And it's really nice to hear all those voices poured into the audio version that is now available on Audible and anywhere else, I suppose, that you listen to your audiobooks. It isn't all about Elvis. It isn't all about Michael Jackson. I mean, there are the things that are going to draw the general audience in on this, but it's really kind of a rumination on our relationships, on our connectivity with each other, on the resonance of loss, because Lisa Marie's son, Riley's brother, died of suicide, and they don't pull any punches in the discussion about how that impacted the family. Not to mention the enduring legacy of Elvis in relation to everyone involved. It is by no means a traditional biography, autobiography, or memoir. This is something really unique and singular, and I highly recommend it. I made mention on a previous episode about heading full-time into the podcast team behind Get Me Another, and we made that official in the last week here. And I'm so excited to be part of this show where we pick a blockbuster film and then examine the movies that came in its wake that tried to replicate its success and carry forward some of its themes and things like that. We just wrapped up the Get Me Another Friday the 13th series, where we talked through a bunch of slasher films that fell after Friday the 13th, and then sprinkled throughout time, especially in the 80s, as the slasher thing was evolving into a more outrageous, bloody spectacle, as all these different special effects teams were trying to one-up each other, and directors were trying to find new ways with more creative kills and things like that. I think we did a nice job of presenting a cross-section of all the different hybrid elements that poured into the movies that became this subgenre that endures to this day. In fact, it can be argued that the slasher subgenre is one of the most enduring things to come out of the 80s. Well, out of the 70s, really, if you turn back the clock. But to the Friday the 13th reference, of course, early in the 80s. Please do head over to the Get Me Another podcast on all podcast platforms and also on Podbean. There's a nice link there where you can listen to the episodes through your web browser if you want to. But appreciate the support for that show. Rob and Chris are amazing co-hosts. And Chris really, he is the captain. His research going into every episode is outstanding. And he leads the discussions that are so fun, and I hope fun for you to listen to. I also just recently returned from my first few days of production on Cooksey, my solo documentary on my incredible sculptor friend, Chris Cooksey. It's such an exciting endeavor for me, this film. I spent 4 days shooting with Chris and his wife Sabrina at their house in around Lawrence, Kansas, where they gave me a tour of all the places that have meant something to them over time. I'm really blown away by the family aspect that is poured into his work and Sabrina's work as a painter and a writer as well. They're just such a cool couple, and his story is going to be a gorgeous one to present. The first few days were a lot of B-roll and I guess you'd say verite stuff, where I'm just a fly on the wall in the room in his workshop as he's creating the stuff. It is the most refreshing thing I've done in as long as I can remember, because it's completely outside the confines of the normal special feature type work. And I'm just incredibly honored to have the chance to present his story and his work to a wider audience, although he's already revered around the world. He's in so many galleries and so many homes of prominent collectors and even celebrities. This is going to be a documentary that has a lot of voices in it celebrating what he does and how it connects with them, because that's really the core story of this. Isn't just here's a guy who creates. It's this is why he does what he does. Yeah, there's some method that's going to be in there in terms of how he approaches it. In fact, I went shopping for parts and supplies with him and captured that with a handheld device, perusing the shelves at different model and gaming stores, as well as we went to an antique mall, and he just sees things different. He has a great eye that's so dialed in. He can look at, just like with his work, his sculptures are these massive things that have an infinite number of stories told within them in these little micro corners. I mean, everywhere you look, if you're standing at the front of a piece or on the side, if you get real close and dig back through the layers, there's always new things to discover, and that's kind of how he approaches going out and gathering elements for his pieces too. I could prattle on forever about my excitement about this, but it is off to a great start. And you can keep up with it here as well as at justinbeahm.com and on my social media, where I'll be posting little updates as this flower continues to open, that is Cooksey. I'm incredibly excited to announce a presentation, not really a workshop, a presentation that I'm now taking out to film festivals and conventions for booking, called Lifting the Veil: Life and Special Features. This concept was born when Tad Good asked me to do a presentation at his Snake Alley Festival of Film in Burlington, Iowa this last summer, talking about my work in documentary and the realm of special features, which was something that I then expanded when I presented it again at the Halloween-a-Palooza convention in Ottumwa, Iowa in the fall. And the response was so amazing. It was really heartening to have so many people that had been in the room for my presentation come up to the table afterwards and share their gratitude for the experience, and then also talking about the various elements that I brought into play during the talk that resonated with them on a deeper level. And that really became my North Star in the month and a half or so since here, as I've locked down the structure of this thing and getting it ready for the road, I guess you could say. If you are a regular listener to this show, you know I'm really into connectivity. I'm really into relationships. All of this is relationships to me. It's not just historical preservation through interviews and whatnot. It's about connections and helping people find their own voice, helping people share their stories and also inspire others. And that's what sits at the heart of this Lifting the Veil Life and Special Features presentation. Yes, there are plenty of stories about films you're familiar with and even some celebrities you may know. But more than that, there's a thread that runs through the entire thing that's meant to inspire through stories of my wild adventures in publishing and then on to special features and film. There's a consistent message about being bold in the decisions that you make. Creatively, personally, and professionally, I think it's really a message and a story that can play anywhere. It doesn't have to be in an event that's related to movies. It's something that really goes beyond that. And I have a lot of fun up there. It's interactive and funny, and sometimes getting into some very heartfelt elements too. Interspersed throughout the whole thing are clips from different interviews that I've done, some behind-the-scenes footage from behind the scenes of making these things, some blooper moments, and elements that you never would have seen on the discs that you may have purchased where my documentaries reside. It's a really multimedia interactive experience that I think would be great for your convention or film festival, or if you have a friend who's a part of anything like that, or even corporate events, workshops, symposiums, and things. I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me through the website, justinbeahm.com, through email, which is info@justinbeahm.com, or you can also hit me up via social media, where I would love to hear from you. On the other side of the interview are voicemails from you guys. The topic for this episode is favorite celebrity interactions at conventions, and I can't wait to dive into those messages from you. I got a number of calls as well as a couple emailed responses on that. But first, here is my discussion with Thommy Hutson and Mark Allen Miller. Thommy and Mark, let's turn off our cameras here. If you just hit the cam button at the bottom there, Mark, and it'll turn it off, and that kind of helps with the bandwidth.
Save ourselves some bandwidth.
Yeah, there we go. Thommy and Mark, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to talk with you guys today because you have so many exciting things happening, and most notably the doc of Chucky, which we're going to get into here, and then Thommy, Never Sleep Again. I mean, you guys have been hustling over the last few years here, to say the least, and it's just a thrill to have you on the show. So thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
This is great.
Thommy, you and I, God, we go way back.
We go way back.
And I want to start with talking about Elm Street, because we're recording this on the anniversary week, really, of the release of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear when you first encountered that film and how it resonated with you so deeply that it led through all these decades and to you writing the ultimate book on its making.
I mean, I always think back, and it's funny because I write about this in the introduction to the book because it was such an impactful thing. I didn't love horror from like this super early age. It was kind of, it was thrust upon me by my grandmother, who made me watch horror movies because she liked to watch horror movies, and she was babysitting me, and I sort of was just there. And then I sort of started peeking through my eyes, and I kind of started to like them more and more. I liked that kind of feeling of being afraid, but feeling safe. And then, I remember seeing the commercial for A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was terrifying. I mean, it was just a TV commercial, but I was terrified. And I was both horrified and titillated, and I wanted to see it. And I always tell the story that my dad was like, "You're not taking you to see that movie. Like, there's no way I'm taking you to see this movie." And he was, probably, in his mind, I'm not judging anyone's parental style, but in his mind, he was trying to be a good parent. And, ultimately, I won him. Maybe I didn't win him over. I probably just, he got tired of me
Just
bothering
wore
him
him
about
down.
it. Wore him down. And we went, and I was literally terrified. I was petrified to the point where I started crying. I was so scared of that movie just from the beginning. It was just so dark and dank and oppressive and terrifying. And seeing this beautiful blonde girl being so horrified and terrified, and then seeing glimpses of that face and it was just so scary. And when he pops up, I was done. I did not want to stay. And my dad was like, too bad. You wanted to see this junk.
Yeah.
We're staying. He didn't use the word junk. He used a much, much bluer word that I shall not repeat here for all the families listening. But you know what? It had the exact opposite effect of what he hoped. He thought, I'm going to keep him there, and he's never going to want to do this again. No, 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 Dad, no, Dad. I fell in love with horror. I was like, more, I want more. Now I want to see the rest of it. Now I want more Freddy. I want more Jason. I want more Michael Myers. So that movie, that moment is so impactful for me. I will never, ever forget it. And it just kind of set me on a course to just love movies and love trying to find ways to make people afraid and feel all the things I felt, which was empathy and terror and, laughter and things like that. So that's really the moment that got me was
That day, an addict was born.
that day a horror addict was born. And I was older than a lot of people these days. I mean, these days kids are watching that movie when they're 5.
Yeah.
And I was not 5. I was much older. But I loved it. At the end of the day, I look back and think, had it not been for that moment, I probably would not have seen the rest of A Nightmare on Elm Street. So that just set me on a course to really want to make movies and then eventually dissect them and find out what makes the horror movie tick, but what makes the horror audience tick as well. And I think it all comes down to that moment.
Mark, what was it for you? What was your on-ramp?
What's weird is it's pretty similar to Tommy's. I was pretty I always loved movies, and pretty much ingested whatever I could, but save for horror films. And then my aunt was the one that babysat me, and she loved horror movies. And so we would ride bikes to the video store down the street, and she would always pick a horror movie, and it was just sort of. She wore me down. She just kept putting them on, and I had no choice because it was just, me and my aunt in my childhood home, just one after another. And Tommy was saying, people show their kids, stuff when they're far too young, and I was one of those. And I'll say, the first Friday the 13th movie I saw. I was probably 5 years old, and
Wow.
and it was what's the one after Tom McLaughlin's one? It's the one with
New Blood. Come on.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the
No.
telekinetic.
no, it's the one with Melanie Kinnaman. It's the most violent one. It's the one without Jason.
No, that's 5. You went backwards.
5.
It's
I
the
went
one
backwards.
before. It's the
Okay,
one before. Tom.
one before. So it was 5. It was 5. There was no Jason, and it was just like this random dude. And it was direct. I later, of course, I find out it's directed by a porn director.
Right.
So it's clear. It's the most savage. It's the most sexually,
Your aunt was showing you
illicit.
horror porn before horror
Yeah.
porn was something.
Oh,
Basically, yeah. So that was my entree, and it was horrifying. That was just the beginning of me watching so many movies that I was way too young to watch, and now I'm scarred for life, and so here I am, trying to make sense of it all. This is really just therapy.
Therapy. Yeah, it was similar for me, where it was seeing things that I shouldn't be seeing at my babysitter's house, where she would leave me unattended in the basement when she would take a nap
Wow.
midday. And it wasn't even hardcore stuff by any means. It was Elephant Man, Town That Dreaded
Yep.
Sundown,
Ooh,
a
Yep.
that's
movie.
that
Yep.
movie is scary. Town That Dreaded Sundown is like this weirdly like terrifying movie, but at times it feels I dare I say campy, but it's not. I don't know.
Right.
That movie freaks me out.
Yeah, Charles B. Pierce can't help but be campy
But
to
it's
some
still
extent
creepy.
in everything he does. It is so creepy. The scene that really haunted me was the trombone in the train.
Yes. That's exactly what I was just thinking. I'm like, it should be campy, but it really is haunting and terrifying.
Yeah, it's played so straight. It's played so
Oh,
straight. And
Great.
that's similar to when you look at Nightmare on Elm Street, where now it's kind of transformed in the public perception because of all that Freddy became. He went
Yeah.
from this terrifying character in the original, where it was about the kids, into these films that kind of really eventually I mean, Freddy became the centerpiece of everything. Not that he wasn't in the original, but it was different there. And then he has his own album out, and then he's on the centerfolds and Fango and stuff.
Yeah.
And we kind of lost sight of the horror of.
He's got a 1-900 hotline.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. And it's interesting to me how these things transition over time, and yet how they resonate with us. It's so unique. And Tommy, you've
Yeah.
had your hands in the nightmare realm for a long time, going back also to the Never Sleep Again documentary that you did with Dan and Andrew, and a real milestone, that documentary, because it brought everything under one roof. And that's something that hadn't really ever been done before. Now your book is different, though. Your book isn't looking at the franchise. Your book is looking at the original film and its making. And I remember you and I talking about this book before it was published. Like, what was that? Back in like 2013
I
or
think,
something?
yeah, 2013, 2014, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about the origin of the book and your process for writing that.
I mean, the book came about because we did the documentary, and there was just so much more that, you can only fit so much in. I mean, honestly, and we'll probably get into this, we dealt with this on all the documentaries, including Doc of Chucky. You just have so much material, and you
Yeah.
only have so much time. At the
Right.
end of the day, there is a time limit, and you can only fit so much in. So I was talking to Dan Ferens, and we were just like, what's next and what do we want to do? And I had said something like, I would love to do a book like Peter Brackey's book on Friday the 13th, the incredible, like, Friday the 13th Bible, Crystal Lake Memories,
Incredible.
on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And he was like, oh my God, you should do it. So I credit Dan with being like such a cheerleader on that idea. And as I did originally plan to do a book on the entire franchise, and then I just started writing the segment on the chapter on part one, and it just got longer and longer and longer. And I realized, like, if I just cut everything down so I can make a book about every movie, I'm just going to be transcribing Never Sleep Again, the documentary.
Right.
So I just thought, let me see what I can do with this first movie. And it was getting toward, another anniversary. And people who were reading the manuscript were like, this is really, really interesting. This is really wonderful. You should do it on just the first movie as a celebration of everything that started it all. And that's sort of what happened. So then my idea was, well, I'll do a book on every movie because I have so much material.
Yeah.
And I have, oh my gosh, I have so much done on a book for part two, which may never happen.
Oh, come on.
I thought to myself, if I start writing books on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, like part one, I'm going to be doing this until I'm 95 years old. But the idea of the book, and then getting to interview even more people that we didn't get to talk to, like getting thoughts from Adrienne Barbeau,
Yeah.
On Swamp Thing, because I wanted to talk about Wes's career in much more depth than we did and that we had time for in the documentary, and talking about Bob Shaye's career and the beginning of New Line Cinema. All of that to me helps tell the story and set the stage for A Nightmare on Elm Street. And that's why the book kind of became this standalone celebration of the original, because without that movie and without that foundation, there is no franchise. And I think you can kind of see how different that movie was when you read about everyone saying everything they say about it. Freddy was really dark and really in the shadows, and you barely see him. And then, of course, as we just talked about, later on, he is the centerfold in a Fangoria magazine because fans can't get enough of him.
Yeah.
But in the first movie, no one went necessarily because of Freddy Krueger. They didn't know who he was. But he was super terrifying, and you went and you enjoyed the ride. And I feel like that might be with everything. I mean, and I could be wrong, but I don't know. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did people go see Friday the 13th Part 2 because they were in love with the character of Jason? I'm guessing no, because they didn't really know him yet.
Right.
But there was still a great story there, and there was still a good movie there. And
They
as
wanted
those
more Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like as these franchises go along, they realize what audiences are gravitating toward, and that is the Freddys and the Jasons and the Michael Myers. And, I remember in Crystal Lake Memories, I think it's even in the trailer, Melanie Kinnaman, speaking of Part 5, has this great line that's something like, they love Jason. They love Jason more than they love the kids.
Yeah.
And she's absolutely right. And I feel like that happened to Freddy as well. And that's something that I would love to explore if I ever do these other books. It's not just the evolution of a franchise; it's the evolution of a character. Really,
Absolutely. Yeah, and and you asked the question a moment ago, Thommy, about whether people were going to see Freddy. Of course they weren't. They had no frame of reference for him, and also it was a revolutionary character because that film, in addition to initiating the franchise, it also initiated the supernatural slasher, I guess you could say. He functions in dreams. He functions in all these different realms. And when you knock those boundaries down, when you kick those walls out, you don't have to live in any kind of realism. You can blend fantasy and reality. And that's where the franchise went as the genre was heading into this keeping up with the Joneses effects game, right? Where everyone's trying to one-up each other on practical effects and eventually gore and things like that. I mean, Nightmare was tailor-made for that because it had no restrictions on where it could take audiences.
Well, and I think the other interesting thing about that is when you particularly, watch the documentary or actually read the book where it goes much more in depth about Wes's, process of trying to get this movie made and trying to sell it. And everyone was like, nah, dreams aren't scary. And I don't know that people, and those people were so wrong because I don't know anyone who watched that original movie and thought, oh, she's in a dream, so this isn't, I'm not scared. Oh my God, no, that was when it got scary.
Yeah.
Like those people who passed on it because they thought the dream thing wouldn't work are just historically now proven so wrong. And
Still working today and still giving terrible notes.
Exactly. They're absolutely giving notes that are wrong. But I love that idea that I got to explore more in depth of how Wes just persevered and how Bob Shea was like, you know what, I see it. I get it. And I think that audiences will too. And it's like, it really is that kind of success story of it only takes one person to believe in you and amazing things can happen. And that's really what happened. A lot of people said no, but Bob said yes. And I think that, that's something that is so important and can't be overstated that it took that one person to believe in Wes's incredible idea so he could bring it to life. And, thankfully again, not just for horror, I think for movies, thank God, such a great thing for cinema.
Yeah. Rachel has talked a lot about that with me over the years, about the challenges that they faced through the whole franchise, really. I mean, Bob was the motive, he was the heart of the engine of this whole thing that kept it moving along. But it wasn't an easy sell. It wasn't something that was just an obvious yes for people, I mean, all the way through to the end. And to hear her, I mean, I'm excited for her book to come out. She has her autobiography, which she's wrapped up, and
which I'm publishing.
Yeah. I thank you for picking that up, Mark, because her story.
Thank Thommy. He was the one that made the introduction.
Oh, really? Nice.
I'm trying to bring people together.
Oh, well, her story is so fascinating for so many reasons. I mean, people. Yes, she's visible above. She's visible through Freddy's Dead. But people need to know the rest of that story and the story of New Line and the story of Wes. And so, Mark, when you started talking with Rachel about her book, this is very relevant here. what were you connecting with in terms of her story, and and without giving too much away on it, because we really want people to pick it up when it lands. What did you pull from the book in reading
I
it?
mean, before I'd even read it, the thing that excited me the most, of course, diehard Freddy fan, and I got the first meeting we ever had. I got to show her. We were on a Zoom, and I have it's the chalkboard from Freddy's Dead,
Oh,
where they're tracing, Freddy's history throughout
yeah.
time. I have that print on a canvas bag, and I got to show that to her, and she was like, "Why? Why? Nobody likes Freddy's Dead." And I'm like, first
Oh,
of all, you're dead wrong. But the one that really excited me is that I am a dyed-in-the-wool Tank Girl fan. It's so good. I just love it in the background. It's just like so much eye candy. I
yeah.
mean, I saw it in the theater. It blew my mind.
I saw it on opening Friday.
I did
Me
too.
too.
Yeah, we were all there in different parts of the world, right?
That's
Yeah.
wild. Yeah, I still have my ticket somewhere. I keep looking for it.
Yeah, I've worked
But
on.
really, like that was the thing. I when we the memoir is like 500 pages long. I mean, it is expansive. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And it really, I think the major takeaway is it's yes, it's her story, and yes, it's the story of a woman working in the industry, and all the pitfalls that come with that, especially in the dark ages, pre Enlightenment, as it were, when women were second class citizens, and there's so much heartache that she went through, but by the same regard, even on sort of my macro level of entertainment experience in the industry, there is so much that I related to. Just all the abuse I've received over the years,
Mm.
all the frustrations, all the projects you've seen die by 1,000 cuts. It's really for anyone that has ever tried to make something, like this is the book for you, because it just shows you that it doesn't matter what level you're operating at. There are still going to be people there trying to kick your legs out from underneath you, and just keep going. The only way through is forward.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. I'm
That's
very
where
excited.
remain a huge Tank Girl fan. I still have a big Subway poster from when it landed, and
No
it's one of my
way.
prized possessions. And
Say if there's a fire, you're taking that.
that's one of the things I'm grabbing. Absolutely, yeah. But that's where Rachel and I first connected, then I produced the Shout disc, the special features on the Tank Girl Shout disc. That was like my first one of my first
Wait a
solo
minute.
gigs.
Wait a minute. I think she mentions you in the book now that you're talking about
Yeah,
this.
she does.
Yes. Hold. I just
Oh,
had a flashback. Holy smokes.
yeah. It was
Tank Girl,
really,
by the way, is on Tubi right now, or it was, for anyone who wants to watch it, on a loop.
and I just
Totally, it's right
Me
there for the watching.
right here.
so good. And so there's all these
Wow.
personalities in this, and this takes us back to Wes and Tommy. To say we miss Wes is one of the
Oh my
greatest
God.
understatements
Yeah.
that we could make. And I I had I worked on Red Eye for Paramount. I think it was last year or the year before, and that's one of his sort of unsung later works. It's one of these under celebrated pictures. But we found this in the archive there at Paramount. The archive team there is amazing, and they found an interview that he had done, and nothing had ever been done with it for Red Eye, during the time of Red Eye, and so I made that its own piece, like a standalone thing, because I wanted Wes's voice involved there. I really wanted his voice to be in this, and for people to see that at that time he was doing a lot of produced by, presented by, like Wes Craven Presents type stuff that he was kind of at
Yeah.
arm's length away from. And I think because of that, maybe there's a certain idea out there that he had somehow kind of checked out at a certain point. But this interview illustrates that it couldn't be more opposite. I mean,
Yeah.
the reality with that. I would love to hear about your relationship with Wes, going back to when you first met or talked to him.
I met Wes at a premiere, and it was a very, very fleeting. I don't even remember who introduced me. But it was, oh, this is, Tommy Hutson, and he's a writer, and da da da. And it might have been someone from his team, because one of my former writing partners and I had become friendly with someone who worked in his office in development, and they read something that we wrote that they liked. And I think it was just this kind of like, oh, let's keep the relationship open. We're not necessarily doing anything right now with, we're not looking for anything specific, but we liked your stuff. And I think that this person introduced us at the premiere very fleetingly. And then, not much longer after that, there was the interview for Never Sleep Again. And that really came about because of Heather Langenkamp was kind enough to kind of shepherd that and make some calls and really help, make that happen with people in his office and things like that. And so that's really when that relationship started, because we not only went to his office to interview him, but it was this whole thing. He had this great office with these like, I felt like they were like almost floor to ceiling windows. So we had to like black them all out. And he was so wonderful and he was so patient, just sitting in the chair, watching the crew black the windows out. And he would be like, I think you need some tape up there, And then like we had crew members literally like holding the black tarps with their bodies while he's being interviewed. I'll never forget it. And he was just the most wonderful, gracious. He gave so much time. And, in between, he and I would chat about things. And Heather and I had been friends for years prior. So that was something that we sort of had in common. And that was a little entree of, just kind of talking about Heather and things like that. And then, he would get back to the interview and he just showed himself to be the person that everyone says he is, which is just this really warm and funny and incredibly intelligent human being and just so kind. And so after the documentary, we then did Scream, Inside Story for Bio Channel.
Right.
And then, we, again, the same thing, we contacted the office and we talked and he was wonderful and he interviewed. And so we talked a little more about that and we furthered, just conversations. And then I wanted to do the book. So I reached out and again, he was kind enough to respond. And that was really the moment that started more of, in my mind, the luck of having any kind of relationship with a human being like Wes Craven. We would email a lot back and forth about the book, about life, about things that, he would just say funny, witty things. He would talk about birds. Obviously, everyone who knows him knows that he was an avid bird person. And it just kind of snowballed into this wonderful back and forth. And I remember one time I said something like, I really don't want to bother you, but, here's a question for you. And, blah, blah, blah about my life and my day. I hope everything's going well. And, I'd get a response and he'd be like, you're not bothering me. You're helping me take my mind off what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And I'm, loving the interruption. And it was just so real. And I just felt really, really lucky. And that kind of snowballed. And when the book came out, I went to his house to give him copies of the book. And that was just such a great experience because this I'll never forget. We're sitting there and I'm giving him the book and we're chatting and it was wonderful. And it was wonderful to meet Ia. And he just starts paging through the book. And then he went back to the beginning and he just took a couple moments and was reading. And then I'm just sitting there watching him and,
Wow.
loving this moment, him reading my book. And he looks at me and he goes, do you mind if I just take a few minutes and read some? And of course I'm like, do what you want. You're Wes Craven.
Yeah.
and you're reading my book. I'm like, read the whole thing.
We'll sit here. I won't move.
Yeah, I'll do nothing but watch you read my book. Let me take this moment in. And he did, and he would, chuckle and when he was reading it, which made me smile, and he closed it and we talked about some of the things in the book and he read my introduction and he, talked about some of those things and he read some other little passages here and there. So we had this really great conversation just about movies and things like that. And then, I had mentioned this on another interview or something where he asked me if I would sign his copy.
Oh my
And of
God.
course, I'm just like, and I go back to being the kid terrified of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then now I'm here sitting in his dining room and we're chatting and he wants me to sign his book. And I mentioned this like, and of course, what do I forget to do? I forget to ask him to sign mine.
Oh no.
I know what can you do? But anyway, the very, very fleeting moments and relationship that I had with him, much of it over email, was wonderful. And I feel incredibly lucky to have been able to have conversations with him about movies and conversations with him about things in my life and things in his life, and him just showing me things like him showing me the sledgehammer from Elm Street. He's like, hey, pick that up. And I was like, oh my God, it's the sledgehammer from A Nightmare on Elm Street. So anyway, I mean, I'm just grateful. It's not often that you get to meet your heroes and they turn out to be not just what you expect and hope, but worlds beyond in the best way. And that was who Wes Craven was to me. I have met a lot of other heroes, and let me tell
And you
you,
wish that you did
I
not.
wish he did not. Wes Craven was not in that category. It goes down in my, in the tiny little speck of grain of filmmaking sand in the beach of filmmakers. I will never ever forget it. And I feel like I would imagine most people feel that way when they talk about meeting Wes Craven and having any kind of relationship with him because that's who he was. So you'll have to cut all of that down to make it interesting. So
No way. That's incredible. And that's true. There's so many times that you meet a hero and it doesn't pan out that same way. And then for you guys, I think it's really interesting that you guys were connected and then you would sort of disconnect, then you'd move back into connection for another project. And so you were kind of tapping in over the course of a number of years with him. Do you think that you got to the point where you figured out the magic of Wes Craven and what made him what he is?
no, and I don't know that anyone can. I think that I feel like the people like the Wes Cravens of the world who are able to do what he did, which is create things and also reinvent things. I mean, multiple times he created things. I mean, look, Last House on the Left is a film that has so much power, and I feel like in terms of horror and just in cinema, like you didn't always see that from people, and he did that. And then he has A Nightmare on Elm Street, which reinvents horror, in so many ways. And then he does Scream, with Kevin Williamson, and that changes the genre. And then he does Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which changes the genre.
Yep.
I don't know that whatever magic and wonder that is inside him, and any filmmaker who can do that, I don't know that you can truly understand it unless you're that person, because that is part of the magic, right? Magic is, I don't know how you do it, but make me wonder and awe me with it. And I feel like that's what I love about it. I'm kind of glad I don't know, because I don't want to see behind the curtain in a way. Like with some people, I don't want to see behind the curtain, and he was one of them. And I wanted to be awed by the magic he created, and I was.
That's a really interesting thing for all three of us to discuss, is lifting the veil on the magic. And there are times, because I've been doing the behind this, like the special feature thing for like 12 years now or whatever. And there are times where I feel like I kind of wish that I didn't know as much as I do. And I wish that I wouldn't have gotten as inside as I have, because I've always described working on these things as going into a doomed relationship, because I get hired for a title. And if I'm lucky, it's something I love, which I've been very lucky on so many titles over time, to be part of movies that I just treasure. But I go into it knowing that I'm going to spend this really intense window of time with it, watching, rewatching, combing over every second for the right soundbite, the right clip, the right whatever. And by the time it's done, it's almost like I can't face it for a while. I'm curious if you guys are the same way. When you were done, like, we're not going to jump ahead into Doc of Chucky just yet, but I mean, on that one, for example, what an immersive experience for you. When you make these things, Mark and Thommy, do you guys feel that same way, that there's an odd loss at the end of being so close to something for so long?
Oh, absolutely. And like you, I can't revisit it for a while. It takes me some time.
No, it's true. I mean, when we were making, Never Sleep Again and Scream and Friday, Crystal Lake Memories and all the, I mean, you're talking to so many people, and you're literally, I mean, you're seeing how the sausage is made, and we also have the movies playing, because I'm watching them to get questions, and I'm watching them to make sure, okay, that is what they said, and or people are just waiting and they like watching the movies in the green room, you know. It's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
fun. They're like, "Oh, I never saw this one." It's interesting on
No.
Friday the 13th how many people in that franchise have never seen many of the other movies. They're like, "Which one
Huh.
is this?" But I can tell you, it takes a long time for me, after I make one of these things, that I don't watch the movies for a really long time.
Yeah.
There's a healing period.
There's a yeah, exactly. But because I will never watch, and I mean, especially the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I will always love that movie, and I will always appreciate that movie. But I don't watch that movie, and I can't watch that movie the same way ever again.
Hmm.
Like, because you just know so much, and like you said, you dive so deep. I don't watch. The Freddy coming from the wall. All I now see is Jim Doyle behind on apple crates pushing through spandex, and I know that
Yeah.
everyone knows that story. And I don't know how many other people feel that way, but I've heard that story a million times, and Jim and I talked about that story, especially for the book, and so now that's all I think about. And I think about watching when Amanda's character Tina splashes on the bed, and there's that edit that Wes doesn't like because of the censors, and there's all these little things that I stop enjoying the movie and I get pulled out and I start thinking of, oh yeah, I remember when so and so said. I'm like, Tommy, stop.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the movie. So it takes me a long time to go back to watch a movie and kind of feel immersed in it again.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's in a way we're sacrificing our relationship with this stuff for the benefit of the audience, right? Because they
Yeah.
want that behind the scenes. This is going to be their only insight into it within whatever the running time is of whatever we've created. And I think that that's an interesting sort of balancing act, delivering something that doesn't sour the experience and the relationship that everyone has with these things. Because your Doc of Chucky is the definitive statement on this franchise. And just like Crystal Lake Memories, just like Never Sleep Again. I mean, like, these are monumental undertakings and presentations that are never going to be equaled or even attempted, because they just it doesn't need to happen again. And you guys do such a tremendous job, so thorough a job with these, that you are writing the story of the history of these films. And I'm curious. Okay, so going to the book, the first time you were working on the Never Sleep Again book, Tommy, you were trying to find a home for it. And it ended up having, if I'm not mistaken, a relatively limited initial pressing, right?
Yeah.
Like a limited release. Can you talk about your effort to find, like we talked about this idea for Nightmare on Elm Street and Wes having a hard time finding a home for it. Tell me about you trying to find a home for your book.
I mean, the fascinating thing was people wanted the book, but they didn't want to touch it because of, fair use issues and, oh, are you sure that you can actually have so and so say, ABC about person X? And I'm just like, well, yes, they can. This is their story. I'm telling their
Yeah.
story. We're not making it up. I mean, this is what their memories are. So people were just really cautious for some reason. And I just really believed in it. And I had so much wonderful material. So, I decided to put it together on my own. And I thought I will offer it to people I'll do a Kickstarter campaign. I mean, I feel like Kickstarter felt new at the time. It wasn't new, but I feel now doing a Kickstarter campaign is nothing.
Is literally part of the business
It's
model.
part of the business now. It's not
Yeah.
shocking. It's not like, what is this and what does this mean? But back when I was doing it, I would get emails like, is the book real? Like, is there really a book going to come out? Or I mean, literally people would email and say that. And I'm like, no, the book is real. I made the documentary. Now I'm making the book. And they're like, okay. And so we make the goal and it's wonderful. And I said I would never again do the hardcover coffee table book. I did want that to be special because people who did the Kickstarter believed in it, and then of course after it comes out, people come out of the woodwork going, "Oh, I wish I would have done it," and
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I made a promise that I'm
That's
not
what
gonna.
eBay's for.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna do that version again. But then a publisher reached out a couple years later, I think, and they wanted to do the book, and I said, well, I'm not doing the oversized hardcover coffee table full color book ever again. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because I said I wouldn't, and I don't want to do that to the people who I promised to. They got something special, and I promised them that specialness. So,
Yeah.
but then anyway, the paperback comes out and it's black and white, and that I think is a really nice, accessible version of the book. I mean, the photos are there. It's black and white, but it's still, yes, the photos are important, but I want people to also understand that the stories are important and that the words that people were saying are important because that's the history. The pictures are great, and I love so many of the wonderful photos that people shared with me from that cast and crew. But more than that, I love what they said and the meaning that movie has for them. And I think that's really important. So that version came, and then, I got the rights back after that, and it laid low for a while. And then with the anniversary, I just thought to myself, I'd really love to find a way to do this again and put the book out there just in case some people don't have it and some people don't, but a way that someone can have this copy, to read through. I call it the reading copy. Like, this is a great reading copy. Like, don't, if you have the hardcover, you don't want to mess it up. You have this as the reading copy. So Dark Ink is a publisher, and we, did a deal, and I'm really excited that it just re-released again in the paperback version. It's also an ebook, and there's also a hardcover with a dust jacket. It's still, not the full color or anything, but it's a smaller hardcover, and I'm just pleased that it's out there because I just think it's a great story about the making of a movie. Whether you like horror movies, whether you like A Nightmare on Elm Street, or whether you just like to know what it takes to get a movie off the ground, I just love the story, and I'm just glad that it's out there again for people, and especially in time for the anniversary of the original film. It's kind of this great reminder of, we're celebrating 40 years of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now read about how it almost didn't happen, then happened, and almost didn't happen again before it happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's an audiobook forthcoming by
Yes.
Encyclopocalypse Publications.
Good. They're and number one right now in horror movies and video on
Yay.
Yes, it
Amazon.
is.
And yeah, I mean, I think that it's unique that we get a chance, that you have a chance rather, to revisit something like this, because once we create stuff, we kind of send it out to the universe, and then we have to sort of march forward into whatever's next.
Right.
Did you go back in, and how much did you do in retouching this, Tommy, on the revisit?
The retouching was really just cleanup. There was a
Okay.
lot of stuff in there that needed to be kind of re-edited, and one of the versions, you know, someone had me change some tense. It was very strange. So anyway, it's cleanup. It's not changing anything because again, there's not. I mean, this is a 300 something page book on one movie. There's not that much more to add. Yes, every scene we talk about, I probably could have had another 3 pages, but at some point, again, time constraints,
Right,
page constraints.
right.
But I do have an additional thing from Robert England, who in the original version, I had wanted to see if I could get a piece from him, and his schedule obviously is just crazy.
Right.
So it was really, really tough. But it finally worked out time wise to get a piece from Robert, and that's in there now. So it's this nice little piece of afterword, paired with Heather's because she has an afterword as well. So that's just a nice thing for this release is that now Robert, in addition to being a part of the book in terms of all of his incredible stories, has like another little stamp of now I'm talking as Robert England remembering what this movie means and things like that, as opposed to just this is how we did that scene. So I'm really excited about that aspect, that Robert is a part of the book in a bigger way, in a different way than just being kind of that interviewee. So, and it has a nice cover. I like the new cover as well. I thought
Yeah,
the
it's
designers
great.
did a fun cover on that. I told them, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and they came back with this really cool thing and the slashes. And I'm just really proud of this book. I worked really hard over a number of years to make this book happen, and it wouldn't have happened had there been no Never Sleep Again and meeting all these incredible people from that franchise. So I just hope people get the book who, again, like movies, who like A Nightmare on Elm Street, who like Wes Craven or anyone involved, and just take that deep dive into the making of a movie that, almost didn't happen I mean, that's the fascinating part is not only did the movie almost not happen, but so much was riding on the success of this movie. I mean, literally, Bob Shaye needed this movie to be a success, and it was. And thankfully for, look, there wouldn't be a Lord of the Rings, I don't think, if there wasn't a Nightmare on Elm Street.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's a grandiose statement and people can argue it, but I don't think it's that off base,
It is the studio that Freddie built.
right? Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. Well, that's Tommy. Congratulations, man. I mean, and thank you for your dedication to this and to preserving these stories. And I mean, and not just Wes, but Robert too. What he's Robert is one of the most incredible people I've ever met, and his storytelling is next level about anything. And when he starts riffing and just talking and sharing, I've done a number of panels with him, and it's just incredible his memory.
Yeah.
And
The
all
man
the
is a true raconteur.
yeah, and he also has such reverence for this stuff. He's never shied away from Freddie, and he's never not giving fans. Whenever I see him interacting with fans, you know how the convention experience can be kind of bleak. I mean, he is one of those that is a true hero on that scene because he's always out there doing it, but he's really giving you time. He's giving, he seems to want to hear from the fans on what this stuff means to them. And he's just a treasure.
Well, I think it's super important that, you know, you can tell that there are people who just want to give back to the people who supported them. I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, all of these conventions are happening because fans and audiences like us, we love what they're putting out and we support them and we celebrate them. And I think it's really great when you find people like Robert or you find people like Heather or Amanda or anyone, and they are absolutely okay with giving back and giving of their time. I mean, they're having conversations, they're doing the panels, and they're meeting the fans, and they're shaking hands, and they're at the bar, you know, at the conventions, and they're actually giving of themselves in a way that I think a lot of fans would never have gotten were it not for the conventions, but also because of the generosity of Robert and all these other people. And I think it is special. And they don't have to do a lot of the things that they do. I mean, none of the people had to interview for my book. They could have easily said no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they didn't. And I think that that's really special. And Robert, you know, years after the original release, still trying to find time to do something. I mean, that just goes to show you like the type of person that he is. And I think it shows a lot of what, you know, how his character is built. And I'm just so appreciative. I will always be appreciative of everyone involved in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise for what they have given me as an audience member, but what they have given me in terms of what I've been able to do with my career. It's really special.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. You
Shout
definitely
out
have
to our executive producer who could not be here today because he's at the doctor's. But Michael Perez also produced, along with Doc of Chucky, simultaneously a Robert Englund documentary.
Oh yeah, that's true.
What is it? Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, which just shows how you know, it's a whole retrospective about how awesome Robert is.
so you've both worked in a lot of different like special feature documentary realms. I mean, Mark, gosh, you've been involved in so much stuff too as producer and in this realm. How did you guys end up on Chucky, on Child's Play and Doc of Chucky? I would love to hear about the origin of this.
You know, we had done after Inside Story Scream and then, you know, Crystal Lake Memories, we sort of used to joke, what's left? You know,
Yeah.
what's left to really explore? And Child's Play had come my way previously. Someone had wanted to do it, and it was at a time when I think Curse of Chucky was announced or something. It just wasn't the right time. I was like, well, there's a new movie coming out. I can't look back when there's something happening. So it just didn't work out time-wise. And then, you know, Michael Prez and I ended up doing something else. But then when the franchise kind of was quiet again, you know, after Cult of Chucky, and we were thinking of something to do, you know, Mikey and I were like, well, maybe we should revisit Chucky because we had already made some inroads talking to people and saying, would you be interested in doing it? And the first people we went to were, David Kirshner and Don Mancini,
Yeah.
obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we thought, like many shows, if you can't get certain people, you really don't have a show. If we didn't get Don Mancini or David Kirshner, I wasn't interested in doing it because I feel like they were the core of what this thing has become. I mean, and when they said yes and were, very wonderful about the idea of doing it, it just everything started falling into place. And that's when I think I called Mark and I was like, Mark, guess what you're going to be doing? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Whatever it is, I'm in.
I mean, there's just so much that goes into these as people who make these. As Justin, you understand, like you have so much material that you have to find the right pieces and you have to put them all together. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff. So I said to Mark, I said, look, I'm going to be producing and directing and writing. I would love it if you want to come on board and co-produce and co-write because it's just a beast. And it's just also more fun when you're not necessarily doing it all by yourself. And I think Mark and I had a lot of fun, bouncing ideas and outlining and deciding what to cover and what not to cover. And he would send me things and I would send him things. And it was just a really good, I think working relationship in how
True
can,
collaboration.
yeah, it was a true collaboration of how can we tell the story of the Chucky movies. And by the way, again, it's funny, Mark, you clarified this in another thing. I like the way you said it. I'll let you talk about why we're only covering the movies. This is only the Child's Play Chucky feature
Yes.
films.
Yes, because the project has been, it had been we'd been pitching it for years, and then it was in development for years, and we started, ink was dry on the contract in 2019, which is long before the Chucky TV series was even, a twinkle in anyone's eye. And just the fact that we began production, February 2020. And if you're doing the math, you might you might realize that butts up against a fairly significant historical incident that happened in March. Just a month later, which just shut everything down and and put us on a delay that we're only just now catching up from.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. Like, so we ended up, by the way, there's a fun little thing. There were people in our show who came in to interview and they would not allow anyone on set. I mean,
Yeah.
when I say it wasn't like, okay, let's get everything ready, but I don't want you in the room. No, they wanted zero contact. So there are interviews in our show that were recorded with like remote control. It was super. I was like, if this works, guys, I will be shocked, but let's go for it. I mean, these people came in because they were being safe, they were being smart, they were doing other
Right.
jobs. They didn't want to get sick, like just in
Right.
case. I mean, we were all incredibly safe, tested, vaccinated, everything like that. But they were being extra safe because they think so. There are people on a show, and I will never reveal who they are because I think their interviews came out great.
You'd never know.
You would never
I
know,
defy
but
you to spot it.
they were literally robot interviews. Like the camera was being remote controlled from outside. It was crazy. Anyway, but so all of this show took 4 years to put together because of people's schedules and people not wanting to come in during the pandemic or right after the pandemic. And so this whole thing just kind of was this confluence of events that we just kept this train just kept going and going. And we thought, will we ever actually be able to finish the show? And some people said yes, but we didn't get them in the chair for over a year later. I
Yeah.
mean, it just was this constant, like, can you? And there are people who said yes and,
Never
for
showed up.
5 months and just didn't show up the morning of their interview. They didn't call,
Yeah.
they didn't write. And we're like, okay, I guess we're wrapped for the day. So and so is not coming.
Glad we spent the time renting the studio.
I know. So, I mean,
There.
it honestly, with everything we went through, the show is kind of a minor miracle. And I'm really, really happy that we were able to do what we did, this deep dive on this Child's Play / Chucky film franchise. And it goes back to something you said before, where we're kind of like peeking behind the curtain as people who make these kinds of things. I wanted to try and do something different. And what Mark and I tried to imbue in this show is not only the, hey, this is how they did this, and this is the legacy, and this is why we love it. But every segment have a little more that makes you want to rewatch the movie. Like again, you're going to watch the movie through a different lens no matter what, because now you know how they did it. But we wanted to have people come away watching the movies thinking about different things that they may never have thought about, but now they know that the filmmakers or Don is the writer or Don is the director or a certain cast member having a certain intention. It all changes the color of how you view that film. And I don't know that I consciously ever tried to do that in the other shows that I've done. But with this one, I was like, there's a lot going on here. And Don had so many great ideas and so many interesting references and things that he was playing off of and all the homages that he wanted to do. I think Mark and I wanted to bring in these ideas in a subtle way so that you watch it and you're like, huh, I never really thought about that movie that way. And maybe if insert movie here is not your favorite in the franchise, you're going to go back and rewatch it and appreciate it all over again in a totally different way.
And I think the 4 years, while, COVID and all that stuff, while being a curse, also helped us sort of unearth all that amazing material. We really had time to sit with it and learn an appreciation for installments that maybe, weren't our favorites. And
Yeah.
I've said this before, but I went in, say you rank, the installments in a franchise. Everybody does it. My ranking for the franchise has completely changed going in and where I am now. It's wild.
I mean, interesting that Don was coming in with so many ideas about this too. He is a fountain of eternal energy and enthusiasm for this stuff, isn't he? Isn't he just
Yeah.
amazing?
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he would bring up the stories of when he was making these movies or writing these movies or directing them, all of the references that he had in his mind. I mean, whether they were story references or just visual references. And you just realize that he's the kind of person who loves movies and who appreciates movies and appreciates what they can do and what they're trying to do. And that's sort of as we were going along, Mark and I are like reading the transcripts from other people. Don was the last person we interviewed because we felt that was really important because we wanted the lead up of everyone talking about these movies so we could really wrap our heads around, okay, we're only going to have Don in the chair for so long, which turned out to be like multiple days and marathon sessions. So again,
He sat with us for at least 12 hours combined.
it was
So
so
God bless
much.
him.
Yeah, I know, right? And it was really, really good that we did that because we were able to touch on so many different things that other people brought up and that he would then, talk about in much greater depth. His enthusiasm, not just for the movies that he's making, but for movies in general, it's infectious. And you can see why people loved working with him on these movies because it became this family who spoke this language that, Don just kept alive for them. It was just great and exciting. And I found appreciation in the Child's Play Chucky movie franchise that I would never have found had I not done this show. And I'm hoping that audiences respond to it in that way as well.
I ended up working on all of the discs for Shout Factory as they were releasing the Child's Play franchise stuff. And they would do 3 at a time or something. And they just kept calling and I kept doing them. And a lot of it was at the heart of COVID. So it was interesting that we were on kind of parallel train tracks in a way as this was happening. And some of them, due to Don's schedule and things, it had to be remote and whatever else. But I was blown away by his enthusiasm and his passion, yes, but the family thing is the thing that I really latched onto. And that really hit home with me when I was at David Kirshner's house interviewing him, and which was scheduled for, I think, an hour and ended up going 3. I mean, we just really, really connected. And the way that he talks about this as a family, I think is so vital because when we're talking about his life and the way that he's so close with his kids and everything, it parallels the way that he and Don have approached the Child's Play franchise. And so it really is, they have a family and they function that way. And when people would come in who maybe didn't mix well, it felt off because it just like when someone new comes in the family, oh, now so-and-so's married, they bring this spouse in and you're like, whoa, that's not going to work here, kind of a thing. It's very similar with this. And I have so much respect for that. So much respect for Don sticking to his guns, like with the series eventually too, about bringing people into the fold that were really important to him. Bringing people into the fold that might not have been obvious by producer estimates for that show, but not wanting to compromise on that. And talking to Alex, he's when we talk about Don, he starts crying.
Wow.
I mean, that's how close that relationship is there. And it's really incredible. And there are other parallels aside, because I think Wes seems to set the temperature for the room on his films too, like Don does, and helps people remain invigorated and remain passionate about them, give their all. Same for Don. There's also the character of Chucky had a similar transition to Freddy. If you look at the arc overall, where the first film is decidedly dark. And then from that point forward, especially after 3, it pivots hard and it goes into more of a comedic realm, which is very similar to Freddy. Were you finding echoes of Nightmare on Elm Street as you guys were working through this thing?
I feel like we definitely talked a lot about the reinvention. I mean, you can't have a horror franchise go 7 movies. I mean, my gosh, not even 7 movies. Some franchises find ways to do that even sooner. But I mean, yeah, you go from I don't know who this villain is, and he's really scary, and this whole thing is crazy. And then the villain starts to develop more of a personality, and then you have the sort of midpoint reinvention, and that kind of thing. And Mark had brought this up, and it's something I forgot, that we ended up looking back at Never Sleep Again in some ways to be like, okay, how did we do all of this in this amount of time? Or how do we fit, this in only 12 minutes or, that kind of thing. So I feel like there is a similar trajectory in terms of the character becoming more popular than the people that they're killing. Chucky clearly is the hero of these movies in a lot of eyes. I mean, and that is, again, the credit goes to Don for finding a way in and crafting that character in a way that audiences continue to respond to in different ways, but with the same amount of, excitement and love. Like the character is changing, but not in ways that turns people off. In fact, I think it expands the audience.
I'm saying now you see children dressed like Chucky for Halloween.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's out there. I'm waiting for like Chucky-O's, the cereal, right? I mean,
I like those videos where people put the Chucky costume on their dogs and they have this little knife in its hand. It's running toward the camera. That's so great. But these are cultural icons. They're killers, but they're cultural icons. It's a fascinating thing. What were some of the discoveries you guys made about Child's Play and the world of Child's Play and Chucky as you were making this doc?
I would say one of the biggest surprises, and also, we do this supercut where you see it was a surprise for most of the cast and crew as well, was that Jessica Walter was going to be the original voice of Chucky.
Yeah.
I think,
we'd heard rumors, but then we finally found it, on one slip somewhere that was a fax to an executive. And it actually said Jessica Walter. And we said, confirmation, let's do it.
One of the things that fascinated me the most was just like, this wasn't just like, let's throw another horror movie with a killer doll together. Like just the care that David and Don tried to put into each movie, and that they did care. This wasn't always just the cash grab. Like it wasn't just like, let's just make another one because the last one made, great box office. They still thought like, how can we do something different so every movie isn't the same? And I liked learning more and more about that. I loved the kind of, will this movie go? Other people passed on it. And then it took David Kirshner to believe in the Killer Doll movie, which echoes kind of the Wes Craven, Bob Shaye thing. I do think that story of how this has become what it's become, from the worry that maybe people are just not going to make the movie, I find that fascinating. I mean, actors, part 3, we were so lucky. We got so many cast from part 3, and they were fantastic. Oh my gosh, the fun they had remembering things. And the intentions of some of the actors and the revelations that they gave us absolutely make you want to go watch Child's Play 3 again and look for the things they're talking about, because they were absolutely not visible until you heard what they just said. And I loved that. I loved those little discoveries, all those little grace notes.
When I was working on them, it took time and patience, but I got Jack Bender to come in on 3 to do
Nice.
audio commentary. He had been really reluctant, and he eventually confessed that it was his wife who kind of prodded him to come in. And I'll never forget that session, because it isn't just the filmmakers who make these kinds of discoveries as we're assembling this stuff. It can also be the people that were involved.
Yeah.
And he confessed to me before we started rolling that he hadn't watched the film since it came out.
Wow.
And his relationship with it was incredibly distant. And he was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to have to talk about. I'm going to lean on you because I'm going to need you to lead the way. And you hear it, if you listen to that commentary track, you hear moments where he starts to realize that what he did is so much better than what he ever gave it credit for. And what he attributes that to is he's like, I think I really bought into the critics. I bought into people telling me, like, you don't need to talk about that one. And at the end of it, it ends with, when the credits are starting to roll, he goes, Justin, this has given me a new relationship with this film. This has been so important for me to be here today, to do this. And then I always bring a backup Blu-ray in case the downloaded copy at the studio doesn't work, and he saw it sitting on the table as I was getting release form out and all that stuff. And he goes, oh, can I see that? And then he wrote on there, and he scribbled, Justin, thank you for helping me love this movie again.
I think that's
Bender.
great. I mean, that's so important. I think the fact that filmmakers are seeing their own movies in a different way because of the work that you're doing and the work that we're trying to do. And look, we would have loved to have gotten him to discuss it, but the reality is, audiences got from him what he was willing to put out about the film because of you, and that's great. I mean, yes, he would have been fantastic in our show, but maybe he said he put the past to bed with the fantastic commentary that you guys did, and I think that's great.
And what's interesting is Don sort of had the same arc. I think he refers to that as, I think his biggest failure in the franchise. And there even the end of part of the segment in part 3 is he goes, anyway, let's get to Bride of Chucky. But just the things that we've told him, the questions we asked him, and all the stories that we got to share with him from all the other cast members completely seemingly had the same effect, where 3 was sort of this albatross that he felt he had run out of ideas and he had failed fans, and 3 has its lifelong fans. Again, our executive producer Michael Perez, it's his favorite entry in the franchise. And that's one of the reasons we got so many of the cast members is Mikey was not going to give up trying to get anyone and everyone. And that's why, we have, I think, maybe the only Jeremy Silver's interview on record.
Yeah.
It was really exciting to just see everyone, the reunions and everything. I mean, it was amazing.
I think
love
that's
that-
one oh go on.
Well, I was going to say, I love that you guys shot down last because of all of this, because you were able to walk in and have that wide view, the expansive view of everyone's experience on this stuff to bring to him as the lighthouse in all of it. Go ahead, Thommy.
I was just going to say, I mean, and sort of to that end it was important to do that because having done other documentaries of this scope, the last thing I wanted to do was have Mark and I fall into the trap of interviewing Don too early and then having someone else or 10 people say something completely revelatory, and then we're like, but we can't get Don's comment on it.
We already got Don.
Yeah.
This is the worst.
So it was sort of like, in a way, like, so Don, we're creating this thing for viewers to really examine and appreciate and digest all of these films. But at the same time, we were sort of doing that with him and letting him digest all of the things that people who have worked on these movies had said. Because we would tell him, well, talking about Child's Play 3, so and so said X, Y, and Z. What do you think about that? And was that something that you had planned? It's not explicitly in the script, and he would tell us, he's like, no, he's like, I love that idea. And we did talk about it, but we didn't want to make it, we wanted it to be subtext and not text. And yeah, it really helped to be able to sort of give Don the primer of, hey, this is what people are saying. Now we want your take. And it just helped keep the entire, thread, the through line together. Like it really helped us keep our thesis alive. And that's why Don is so omnipresent in the show, because it's his baby at the end of the day. I mean, he was a student at UCLA writing this script, and here we are decades later with a successful franchise of films, and then he had a television show. So he did something right all along the way, and I think that is something that needs to be celebrated. And that's one of the reasons that I think Mark and I and Mikey are proud of the documentary. Is it's not just, hey, how did they do that really neat scene? How did Chucky fly apart when he hit the fan in part 3? It's this idea of what Don created and what David believed in. And also, honestly, the belief that David had in Don from the beginning. I mean, my goodness, we all need a David Kirshner in our lives.
Oh, he's incredible.
No kidding.
To just push us forward and believe in us and
be our champion.
Yeah, be the champion and say, no, we're sticking with person X because I believe in person X and you have to trust me. I mean, I think David is one of the most wonderful human beings as well. And it's just a great success story of what the two of them coming together ultimately created over the decades. And I think that's the other thing. The documentary is, again, more about just how did they do that scene. It's how did this thing come to fruition? How did it stay relevant? How did these two people weather a system that at many times looks down on horror, says horror isn't worth it. Oh, now we want another one because horror's hot again. You know what, though? We don't want another one now because horror's less hot. And they just kept plowing through together. And I mean, that's just such a cool story for any filmmaker to kind of digest. At least it was for me. It's like that success story. Who doesn't want to read about Hollywood success when you're trying to make it in the business?
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, David remains one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. Mm-hmm. His story is absolutely mind-blowing. From his humble beginnings working in a record store, and he's doing sketches. He ends up doing all the album covers for Neil Diamond for years, to the creation ultimately of Strawberry Shortcake.
Yeah.
To his relationship with Ray
Rose Petal
Bradbury.
Place.
Yeah. And anyway, amazing guy. I want to talk about the presentation of the documentary. We're in a world right now where documentary is massive. We called it reality TV for a long time. There's that segment. But I think that just documentaries, whether it's true crime, on to entertainment documentaries, beyond, it's huge on every kind of platform. You guys present this with such a dynamic package. It is, I have never experienced a documentary that has so much visually to keep you just dialed in to what's happening on screen. Tell me about your concepts leading into this. I mean, from the consistent sort of painting style artwork throughout the whole thing, through to the constant cutting, the layers, the moving through the photos and everything. Break that down for me. I would love to hear about how you guys wanted to approach that.
I had Mark introduced me to the artist who did that, Brandon Malberg. I mean, gosh, I was at a dinner a million years ago. I don't even remember why we all met, but we did. And ever since then, I fell in love with Brandon's work. I think Brandon...
I like some Brandon Malberg.
Yeah, his work is just so fascinating. He's able to do so many different styles. And one of the first things I said, for the opening titles, because all of my shows have a different opening. Like, Never Sleep Again has that incredible stop motion opening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Which I just can't get enough of, and it's just so good. And even, Crystal Lake Memories, as simple as it is, it mimics the opening of a Friday the 13th movie, the white credits on black. Mm-hmm. And I just find that to be so charming in a way. More Brains, Return of the Living Dead is the animated vignettes. So Mikey and I often would talk about, like, what are we going to do? And I remember saying, oh my gosh, well, Mark knows this fantastic artist, and he's so good at so many different styles. So I had a conversation with Brandon, and I said, I want something that feels really cool but childlike, but also not like super on the nose. Like it should be just kind of like a tease. And so I would tell him, I'd be like, in this one, let's set it up with, these three moments from the movie, and he would turn around this art, which I just loved, and it carries through. I think it helps you carry through the entire show.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you get that fantastic opening sequence, which runs through the entire film franchise in these great vignettes and this super cool style. And then every segment has like a little opening that allows you to kind of get your bearings. And that's the other thing. If you don't have 5 hours to watch the documentary all at once, good news is you don't have to. If you only love part three, you can just go to part three.
Right.
Like it's kind of its self-contained thing. And then in terms of the visual style, we were lucky that we had a lot of material. Some of the cast and crew had some fantastic treasure troves of stuff, and Mark knows because he scanned a lot of it.
I mean, we went everywhere. We went to Tom Holland's, storage shed. We went to John LaFia's basement. We went to Tony Gardner's archives. We had we had to beg, borrow. We had to do everything to get materials. I had to, for some of our Bride of Chucky materials, I had to make a charitable donation to Covenant House in Toronto, and it was all worth it. It was super, like, we felt like detectives finding all this amazing material. It was, and then every time something, you get to hold something in your hand that you'd never seen before. Oh, I can't wait to show this. It was amazing.
And there's so much that we obviously didn't show. I mean, we have
Yeah.
memos and all these fantastic things. And, at some point, we talked to the graphic team and we're like, here's another memo, make it exciting, because
Zhuzh it up.
zhuzh up this memo, because there's a lot of, especially in the first film, there's a lot of paperwork. There's contracts and there's schedules and there's notes about, voices and whether Brad is going to be done with Mississippi Burning in time, to do the voice. And it was literally like, okay, can we just highlight this word and make it interesting? And I mean, we had a team of graphics people, and they were constantly delivering things. I mean, it would be like, okay, now we need, something like X, Y, and Z. And, a couple days later, these things pop in, and I'm always very excited. I'm like, Mikey, Mark, what do you think? And just sending them off. And I feel like, Benny, our editor, has also, I've worked with him on every single show. He knows this world. He just understands how to cut a multi-hour massive documentary, how to keep it moving. And, the reality is Mark and I scripted the entire thing. Like every single bite was scripted out, strung out, and we make sure that it works. And, then we fine tune from there. But, nothing is really by chance. And we really tried to find ways that the story keeps moving and that the visuals keep moving, and that hopefully at the end of the day, and I'm thankful that we've heard this, there are people who are like, again, just like Never Sleep Again, I got sucked in and I didn't realize I watched 5 hours, or even half of it. Like I stopped at, Cult of Chucky because I'm like, I realize it's 2 a.m. and, I want to finish, but I'm exhausted. So I feel like we've done the right thing by letting people feel like they're kind of like sitting down, they turn it on, and they get sucked into the world of the Child's Play film franchise through the visuals and through the art and through the style and just kind of that excitement of everything. And even the music. I mean, Sean Hennessy, who did our score, who I've worked with many, many times, there's just a shorthand we have where I would say, here's the segment, keep it moving. Like make sure we're feeling that kind of energy to get people to keep moving along. And, it's not just lay down a music bed so there's something. He really thought about it. He would say, okay, this moment is a little more slow and emotional, so I'm going to give the audience, and the music is like just right. And it's just enough that you're not necessarily noticing it unless you're listening for it, but it's helping cue you, just like, a good score should, on how to feel and where you are in the moment. And I just feel like we had such a good team. We had a lot of people on this show. I mean, that we filmed in 3 countries and I think 6 or 7 states. People scattered around the globe talking about Chucky. But we were really lucky that, you know, I would say 99% of it went without a hitch. There's a 1% that we're not that we just, like to put in the closet and lock it up
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's always difficulties, right? I mean, on a show that's this long with this many interviews, Mark and I were often, beating our heads against the wall about certain things and how do we get this, or why didn't we get this? Actually, Mark can be probably more honest and say, Tommy would often be like, guys, why didn't we get this?
Guys, where we need the connective tissue.
Yeah, I'm like,
We're
I
not going to
talked
have
about
a
this.
show.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyway, that's a really long answer that you will probably want to cut down, but
No, 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 no.
just
It's
the flow of the show felt different in a way, even though it's section by section, movie by movie. We definitely wanted to imbue it with an energy and with a through line and with the idea that we're going to take you on a ride that's greater than that was a really neat moment. How'd they do it?
Right.
There's just more to explore in this franchise than meets the eye. And I feel like we discovered it as we were writing it and putting it together.
That's an incredible presentation. It really is. And for the filmmaker listeners, which there are a bunch of people who listen in that realm, I think your process for documentary, you talk about scripting, that isn't always the case. A lot of, especially making of type things, it's sort of hunt and find
Right.
the elements that you're looking for. Tommy, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about, or maybe both of you, about how you do script this out, how you work with transcripts of interviews and things to create the Bible of what is to become these films.
I think
I
Mark
would
is
like to
having
start.
Mark is having a flashback. He's having
PTSD.
yeah,
I hear
PTSD.
I hear the choppers. Do you hear it? You want to play? Uh,
No, go for it,
the
Mark.
I will say I just wanted to start with the fact that Tommy warned me. And he he really did. And I am no stranger to putting a lot on my plate. I often have 9 or 10 different jobs at the same time, and irons in the fire all over the place. And Tommy kept telling me, "Okay, when we start scripting," he said it before we were even in pre-production. He said it during production. He said it as we were wrapping. "I want you to know it's a lot of work, and it's more work than you think it's going to be." And I just kept going, "Okay, Tommy, all right." And then it came, and holy smokes. You really, I mean, first I want to give credit to Tim Vermeulen, who was
Writer
the
assistant.
writer's assistant. He, without him, I might have, I don't know, I might have killed myself. It was there. I mean, we had what 400, 500 hours worth of interviews.
It was so many. It was so
Yeah,
many.
and we had to comb through every and tell. Luckily we had an outline. We had the outline,
Yeah.
so we knew basically where we were going, and which is why we had specific questions that we came to people with. And
Well,
then
and I'm
those
going to pause
questions
you
would
really
evolve.
fast, Mark, because
Yeah.
that's also part of the process that was really fun and interesting because Mark and I have these physical memories of me sitting in the downstairs on a couch watching the Child's Play movies and the Chucky movies, and Mark was doing the same thing in his house, and we would be texting and calling and being like, "Oh my God, I'm on this moment, and it's crazy! Like
Yeah.
we need to cover it," or like, "Ooh, do you
Yeah.
think we need to cover that?" So it really started just from even watching the movies, and then we came up with the outline, which I think, oh my God, wasn't it it was a monster.
Yeah,
Like
it was 50 pages long. It
it was
was
just too long, and we were like, "Oh my God!" But then you get to the whole "Kill Your Darling" singing, and we're like, "Let's just leave it alone for now, and let's write the
yeah.
questions." And then you realize, okay, we have 7 pages of questions for the person who, is only in the movie for 12 minutes. Like
Yeah.
this is not gonna work. So anyway, go on, Mark. Sorry.
So then it became, you have these many hours of interviews with all these people, and you sort of start to have to compartmentalize, like, okay, only these names are in this franchise, only, and so everything becomes subsets, right? So there, it's almost like there's math involved. and from those subsets, you'd have to go line by line and just go, okay, we're talking about the intro. Let's find anything. If anyone says anything about the intro here, okay, they said intro, and you just have to pick and pull all the things. That's an intro line, and then that dovetails perfectly into this. Oh, and then someone mentions this, so I have to make that there. And from start to finish, you have these three act structures for every entry, and you have to find everyone else's words and make it so that 80 different interviews over the course of 500 hours of footage are telling the same cohesive story. And I foolishly thought that would be an easy task.
Well, and the thing is, we had people too, like Mark was saying, like if we were working on, let's say, the moment where Catherine Hicks, where Karen is holding the doll and the head spins around, want to play. Obviously, huge moment, iconic. You can't not cover it as in depth as possible. That's just an example where we would tell Tim, or we had someone else named Mark, we would tell them, here are the transcripts and here is our outline. We're looking for moments X, Y, and Z, and they would then help us find those moments while we were looking for other things. And then basically what we do is then Mark and I put together this kind of giant string out of any single, like all of our outline for the first show with every single bite that could possibly go in would be innumerable pages. I mean,
Yeah.
just so long. It would
Three
be like,
hours, 4 hours.
oh, easily. It would be like
Yeah.
40 people talking about, working with
Yeah.
Catherine Hicks and how great she is. We can't have 40 people say that. It would then be another, it would be 50 people talking about the moment when the head turns around and says, want to
Right.
play. So then what we have to do is we then basically look through and go, okay, we only have so much time. Who do we really want to see? And who is
Who haven't we
saying,
seen that much
yeah,
of?
and who's saying it the best? I mean, because
Yeah.
look, and also the reality is who's saying it not picking their nose. I mean,
Yeah.
what we've discovered is like, and this actually happened on a couple of my early shows, before we had video transcripts, like, because now there's great software and you can actually see the moment in the transcript. Like you can, I'm sure you know this, Justin, you can like click a word in the transcript and you can go to the video immediately. Well, I'll Never Sleep Again I mean, we did that in 2008 and 2009 before it came out. These transcripts were done just by hand. People were
Right.
just, and we would like put this great string out together and it would be like the most amazing thing on paper. And then the editors were like, guys, this person isn't even on camera. They're bent over tying their shoe. Like, or like every other word, they're drinking water. Like, so now we have the ability to kind of immediately go, great bite, not usable, which helps us in time because now the editors don't have to look at it and say this isn't going to work. We already know it's not going to work. But then we whittle it down and then we put it into, like a scripted, a documentary format, like 4 column. I think we actually had 5 columns because we ended up doing something else with imagery. But we everything in that show is like, it's a script, it's a time code, it's who's talking, it's what they're saying, what interview it's from, what we're going to be seeing in terms of B-roll, clips we're cutting away to. I mean, every moment is scripted. There was no chance. There was no, let's just see what happens. It's like, we don't have time for that. We have to make
Yeah.
sure the show works. But I mean, down to the imagery, like I would tell Benny, I would say, while this is happening with, let's say, Don, while Don is explaining X, here are 6 pictures that I want to see in this order. And he would put them and he would use them to cover cuts, or he would do his, amazing jazziness to them. Or I would, the interstitial animations, Benny did those as well. All the narration blocks, Benny created those as well. And everything had a purpose. There was not a lot left to chance. It was Mark and I coming up with imagery, for whatever is being said. I mean, we wrote the narration and we had to be really conscious and judicious about that because we don't want too much, but we want enough each time to set it up. We wanted the narrator to be able to set up each little mini section so we didn't have to interrupt, the flow of someone's story and give more context. It's like, it's a tiny bit of narration to set it up. here's the imagery to use for that. So it really is. I'm sure there are a million ways to make these shows. This is just the way that I've always been doing it, and it
Yeah.
seems to work. So I kind of, keep that train. But I do tell everyone before they come on, I say, this is going to be more work than you can ever imagine. And then after you think you've imagined, imagine more.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's just
And
overwhelming. These are not
he,
tiny shows, and then by the way, this is different than making it independently and throwing it out there. Shudder was involved, and Shudder, thankfully, is amazing. Like they were just so behind the show and the idea and what we were trying to do, and our executive was a godsend in terms of just helping us shepherd through the system, and everyone on the Shudder side just got it and believed in us, and they were our David Kirshner for
Oh,
this show.
I was going to
So
ask
yeah.
about the relationship with Shudder, and were they on board from the very beginning? Did you go in and pitch to them, and then they led to sort of everything moving into motion?
Yeah, we came up with kind of our little pitch deck and went to them. They had already, run Never Sleep Again in Crystal Lake Memory, so
Right.
there was that kind of tangential relationship of, hey, by the way, I'm the guy who helped bring those to life. I'd love to talk to you about something. And they were open to it and showed them the stuff, and it happened very fast. They understood what we were going for. They thought the timing was right as well. The movies had been, at that point, I don't want to say done, but in one of their interim periods,
Hmm.
and one hadn't happened for a while. And I thought, let's cover these first seven fantastic movies, that have been going on for decades. The team at Shudder was just great. They just got it. They believed in it, and I think that's the wonderful aspect of working with them is they just understand horror filmmakers, they understand horror fans, they know what you're trying to do, and they're I never found them to be a roadblock. I found them to be a resource.
That's
It would
great.
be questions of we want to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm worried about A, B, and C. And they would be like, well, look, let's do D. And I'm like, oh, you're okay with that? And they're like, yes. So I thought they were a joy to work with. I just have nothing but good things to say. I remember at one point in the middle of the show, I wrote one of the executive producers, Emily, and I said, I just want to let you know that Nick is amazing. Like, best executive I've ever worked with.
Oh,
Because it's like, it was just, I wanted to make sure that people knew. Because I think in this business, it's just so easy to get sucked into your own world and not share the love and share the joy and just pat people on the back. And, these things are hard. This business is hard, and it takes so many people to make something. I think it's important that, everyone gets, something out of it, whether it's big or small. I think everyone should take whatever they can from whatever piece that they did and just feel good about it, because we're all in it together at the end of the day.
I love it. I love it. So this is out now on Shudder. I mean, fans are losing their minds over this thing. And you talked earlier about prior to Chucky, well, what's next? What franchise, what else is there for us to explore? So it begs the question that people are going to be asking, because you've knocked so many of these out of the park here. What is next for you guys?
next is Leprechaun.
For real?
No. I'm
Look,
just trying to think of the most.
if there's a Leprechaun fan out there with money to burn and they want a documentary, call us.
We'll do it.
I don't
I'm not
know.
opposed.
Yeah, I'm not opposed. I mean, I
We've
there's a
talked about Tremors. We've talked
yeah.
about Showgirls. We've talked about a bunch of different things. We
Halloween.
have
Look,
books. We've
I,
talked about
I
Halloween.
would. There's so much done on Halloween, of course, and there's so many wonderful things on that, fantastic Blu-ray set. I would still love to do the sit down. Sorry, you're gonna have to cut me. I'll start over. I'll start over. I would still love to do that kind of sit down for 5 to 7 hours and do nothing but watch the Halloween story unfold in one fell swoop. That hasn't been done,
Yeah.
and I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Look, there's always something. I mean, yeah, I would love to do Tremors. I think Tremors is so fun. There's a really great book out there about it, and it's like, you can already see that these stories are so great. Now I like to look at ways to take them and bring them, forward in a different way and have, people actually telling them as opposed to reading them. Now you get to, maybe one day see Reba talking about, you didn't even get penetration with the elephant gun.
Could you
I want to know
imagine?
more about that. So,
Could you imagine?
but yeah, I mean, I don't know that I actually ever plan to go, this is the one that's next. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't with, I don't think I don't think it ever really happened that way. I think things fell into our lap. I mean, I think
Yeah.
someone says, hey, what about, oh, that's a great idea. And it works, and that happened with
Just kind
Chucky
of
the first
lines
time.
up.
Yeah, Chucky the first time just didn't line up. And then it came full circle again and it worked.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, I
Tommy,
mean,
you're continuing to write though outside of this realm of documentary. I remember meeting up the last time I think I saw you in person would have been back on Animal. Do you remember that day where we went to the studio and we were doing
oh
some
yeah, we
interviews
went,
for some coverage?
yeah, wasn't it, did we see the monster? Was that the monster?
Yeah, that was
Yeah, yeah.
their reveal of the monster
Yes,
costume
yes,
to you.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I do remember that. Yeah, no, I mean, I always have my hand in something. I mean, I just contributed a short story to an anthology. I have the Never Sleep Again book is, not coming out. It is out right now. Um, we're doing the audiobook for Never Sleep Again. We're doing it. Mark's company is doing an audiobook of my Christmas romance fantasy novel. So I feel like
Right
there's
Christmas.
right Christmas. There's always something. I feel like in this business you have to have your hand in a whole bunch of stuff. I have a new script that I just wrapped up that hopefully Dan Ferrens, who I've worked with many, many times and love working with him, that he's going to direct that we hope to get off the ground soon. So, I feel like, we all know in this business, you kind of have to always have something in your back pocket. Because you never know when someone's going to say, let's do it.
Right. Yeah.
Opportunity and preparation.
And Mark, I mean, please fill listeners in on all that you're doing. I mean, your publishing shingle has exploded in the last
Yes, it
couple of
has.
years here. It's really astonishing.
I have so much less time than I ever imagined myself having. It's been wild, It's the success is I get it's the whole thing, If you build it, they will come, and I just kept building it, and then one day I turned around and I realized, oh, they're here. This is great. And we have novelizations. We've got Chopping Mall coming out. We're trying to find the right one for Thommy. We're gonna have Cube is gonna come out soon. I mean, it just we're having a lot of fun. That's all I can say. There's just check out Encyclopocalypse. There's Tommy Hutson books. Jinxed, the anniversary edition of
Oh
Jinxed is
yeah,
coming
that's
out.
true. It was my first novel. Mark's company, Encyclopocalypse, is going to put out in January a book one, and then they're going to put out book two and three when probably like, I don't know what our schedule is, but it's a trilogy, and I wanted to. So much of it took a back seat because of all the things we were doing, but now Mark's like, let's do it. So I'm excited about that.
Rachel Talalay's book will be
Yeah.
coming out.
Amazing. You guys, thank you. This has been incredible. Thank you for coming on here and talking shop. And what a great story behind these great stories that you're telling.
And, I think we didn't cover the fact that you also worked behind the scenes. Your name is in those Doc of Chucky credits, sir.
Yeah, I got to thank you in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you were helpful in so many ways. And again, I think that goes back to the whole, like, let's just help one another,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's not hard to just prop each other up and just help each other, like, as cheesy as it sounds, like, help each other's dreams come true. I mean, this is a tough business, right?
It is, yeah.
So I just feel like if we can all just kind of do our part and help one another, we're all fans of something, so let's be fans of each other,
Perfect note to end on. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, thanks for having
Thank you,
us.
Justin.
Lovely conversation. Thank you so much to Thommy and Mark for coming on, talking about why we love what we love, getting into the weeds on the production of this immense documentary, Doc of Chucky, that I encourage everyone to check out. And also don't forget to pick up Tommy's book, the Never Sleep Again Story of a Nightmare on Elm Street, available on Amazon. Both that book and Mark's publishing company are linked in the show comments, so please support these guys any way you can. Let's get into those voicemails here. Again, the topic for this episode was about celebrity interactions at conventions. Can't wait to hear what you guys have called in with.
Hey, JB, good old Double H here. So your topic for the next episode of the Radio Hour about celebrity interactions at conventions. Well, I've been to a lot of conventions. Not so much recently. Too many lines. A lot of things have changed. Popularity. And, COVID. That thing. Things kind of change things a little bit. But I have had some really good interactions with people throughout my convention going experiences. Some of the ones that I've really enjoyed meeting were Charles Cyphers, one of the greatest people that I've ever met. Super nice, super friendly. The couple of the items that I had him autograph he'd never seen before. So that's always a treat whenever you have a celebrity and you have something that they've never seen. Tyler Maine, always super nice, super friendly. And he lives down here in the same town I do in Georgia now. It's kind of ironic. I'm not seeing the big guy out though. John Carpenter, he was really nice. His line was long, so, they were strapped for time. But he did take time to interact with everybody. And then probably one of the most memorable is Tom Atkins, the Stash. I've met him several times. Always interested in what you have to say and takes the time to get to know you. Just so many people. I actually met you at a convention one time. You're super nice, JV. Felicia Rose, always super nice. Danielle Harris, she was always nice. There's been far more great interactions with the celebrities than I have had with bad interactions. Never really, guess what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know what the word is. I just went blank. But every fan is going to have something different. My experiences with someone may be different than someone else's. I have had a bad experience with someone. Other people have had great experiences with that person. So, it kind of evens itself out. Everybody's entitled to a bad day, I guess. But usually the horror fans, and the celebrities that are there, the celebrities are always super nice. Some of the people that make the experiences lackluster are the handlers. They're always trying to rush. It's always about the dollar. I get that. But you have these celebrities that like to take the time that will actually take selfies at a table with you, take the time to get to know you, engage in 5 or 10 minute conversations. Those mean things to people. Celebrities leave a lasting impression on the people that come to see them. People spend their hard-earned money, and to get that great interaction, that's the best thing that they can do. With the amount of celebrities that are starting to go to conventions now, it's becoming more and more popular, and people want to see everybody, especially, Halloween franchise. Everybody wants to go meet everybody for that. I still have a few people I need to meet, from the franchise. Friday the 13th, Scream. Now you have a lot of, Scream actors and are going to conventions. So, even for the newer films. So it's just growing and growing and growing. And those interactions are special to people. And there are people, like I said before, that make them a little not so special. And it's usually, like I said, the handlers trying to get through the crowds, trying to get that dollar, things like that. Then you have the people that take baskets and truckloads of items just to get autographs so they can sell it. And that takes up a lot of time. But interacting with people, just to get that one-on-one of somebody that you've looked up and watched on screen for years, sometimes 20, 30 years, depending on who it is very important. and it's just an all around good thing to go to conventions, and even interact with the fans. It doesn't even have to be the celebrities, but interacting with other fans is a good thing. You meet a lot of people. I met Greg at a convention, met you at a convention, met several other people at conventions, Michael Neal, from Infinite Santa, met him at a convention. So it's, you build that camaraderie and that family, from those experiences. So that's all. Hope you can use this VM. See ya.
Sean, thank you for calling in. I love you, man. I really appreciate you dialing into so many different elements of the experience. The convention world can be so many things. It is so many things, and it's different for people on both sides of the table, but there are some uniting elements. And I think my favorite stuff that you touched on there was about the family that grows out of who you meet that isn't a celebrity. It's cool. Tom Atkins, Chuck Cyphers, both of which are just incredible. I'm glad you had a positive experience with Carpenter as well. But my favorite thing is who you meet at these conventions. It's so cool. You met Greg Morgan. You're talking about LOTC, that's Land of the Creeps, one of the most long-running horror podcasts out there, and one that I've had the great honor to be part of a number of times over the years. You and Greg are family to me. And when I go to these shows now, it is what you're talking about, where you connect with fans and even vendors and even some of the celebrities too. But really, it's about everyone outside the celebrity signing rooms to me, because I can go and it could have been a year, it could have been 5 years, and you run into someone and it's an instant embrace and joyous reunion. You're speaking the same language. Everyone in the room is passionate about the same stuff. And it's such an amazing and unique opportunity. And that part of it doesn't cost money. Conventions, like I said, there are many things. One of those things is definitely the financial element. These are not cheap events to go to if you're there for autographs. Like what you were talking about, Sean, and getting to meet everybody from a franchise. I don't know how many times I've seen people show off these posters that are just amazing, packed with signatures from everybody throughout a franchise or everybody from a given film. And it's so cool to see that. But at the end of the day, the memories for me are relating to who I got to hang out with in the lobby, at the after party. One great example on my side is a convention that used to happen up in Worcester, Massachusetts, that I was a part of for many years, called Rock and Shock. This gal Gina ran the show, and she had a music venue that she was managing right behind the convention center. And it was this wonderful hybrid of convention during the day and then live music at night that was blended with the after party that occurred every night upstairs there. And I saw so many great bands. First of all, I remember standing on the side of the stage with Doug Bradley watching Jerry Only's version of the Misfits play. As a huge Misfits fan, man, that was a total thrill. I was right next to Jerry's cabinet. So, Doug and I were just reveling in how great that experience was. But the relationships that formed from Rock and Shock endure to this day, I mean, almost universally. I can't think of anyone that I connected with there that I'm not still in touch with or haven't worked with in one way or another since then. And a lot of those became really close friendships. I really think this is the magic on the convention scene. I think that the celebrity stuff is cool, but the people you meet are what it's all about. And Sean, I'm so glad that you've had that same experience, man. And look, it led to Land of the Creeps. And so many podcasts were born out of friendships made there. So many films were made by people who connect at conventions. You just never know. And this goes back to my point early on in this episode where I was talking about this new presentation thing that I'm taking on the road and talking about those little moments, those fragile moments. Imagine if you hadn't bumped into Greg at the convention where you guys first met and how different your life would be if that hadn't occurred. These events are full of those kinds of opportunities and those moments. And man, I love this voicemail. Thank you so much for calling in, brother.
Justin, this is Scotty from Fun with Horror. Good to hear from you, and here's my answer to my favorite celebrity interactions. I have two. Number one time at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, I was walking along, and there was Michael Giacchino, famous composer, sitting there signing stuff, and there was no line whatsoever. So I asked the guy if I could go in, and he was like, yeah, go for it. I went in, bought a vinyl record, and I got to have Michael sign it for me, which was amazing. He's one of my favorite modern composers right now, film score composers. And then number 2 actually happened at San Diego Comic-Con this past year. I was going into the bathroom, and I was about to leave and wash my hands, and Sam Jones, Flash Gordon himself, had walked in and come up to the sink, and I handed him a paper towel, and he said, I forget what he said. He said something like, thank you. And I said, you're welcome, Sam. And when I said his name, he looked at me, and I was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I just actually watched Flash Gordon in 4K just a couple weeks ago. And we proceeded to have a small, quick conversation about how beautiful that 4K Blu-ray looks. And then I was like, it was good to see you, Sam. And he said, it's good to be seen. It was a really, really super nice guy. And that's it. I love you, Justin. Keep on keeping on, and I'll talk to you soon.
Scotty, what a story, man. That's like your Jack Torrance moment. It's like when Jack and Grady meet in the bathroom and they have this conversation in the most unlikely place. I love that. And, that's another side to this whole thing is it's not always the celebrity behind the table and you in front of them handing them money or whatever it is. It's the best when you're at an after party, you're bumping into them in the bathroom in this case, and you get to have that off-the-cuff conversation that sometimes means more because it's out of the element. And also, there's probably a certain repetition to the discussions that a lot of these folks have when they're on the convention floor. So when you get into that role of people talking, asking about the same things over and over, you're kind of sharing the same stories over and over. So it's nice when it's outside that realm. And when it's unexpected like that, it can often lead into more fulfilling territory. And Scotty, you are so into the physical media realm. Of course, you're going to bring up that Flash Gordon 4K and dive into that with him. And it's really cool that you had that moment with Sam. Comic-Con offers a lot of crazy stuff. And celebrity interactions are one of the things that I don't hear a lot about from that show because it's just such a monolith. It's so huge. It's a packed schedule, and it's just an anthill of human beings. When I was there this last summer and was thrilled to see you there, by the way, Scotty, thank you again for attending that panel and hanging out with us prior to that. I was blown away and a little overwhelmed by how inhuman that show can feel. The lack of connectivity. I mean, really, it's become such a commercial endeavor that the interactive elements of it seem to have taken a back seat. But I'm really happy to hear that you've had a couple of excellent experiences there yourself in your adventures, man. Thank you so much for calling in, brother. It's always good to hear from you.
Hi, Justin. This is Greg from Ohio, from over in the land of the creeps territory. I'm a regular caller over there, and I thought I'd give you a little bit of a buzz. Oh, so we're talking about convention encounters. I'm not a huge on the convention scene. I guess I'm just kind of a bashful guy, and I think it's more or less I just really don't know what to say to other human beings when you view them as movie stars, if you will, or just cinematic stars or horror icons. I don't want to be that person that just has no words to say or just a blank face, because that's basically how I would be. And I would rather more or less be that individual that would say, hey, let's go catch a bite to eat, so I can hear about their more day-to-day regular, what they view the world, how they view the world, and maybe just find some of their interests, what movies interest them, that kind of a thing. Now, with that being said, I have had two, I guess I would say, encounters. One was back in, I think, if memory serves me, it was about 1998. So this was when conventions were more reserved for comic books and Star Trek, and there was probably some early rise of horror movie conventions and other conventions. But for the most part, you'd find these, horror icons that would just kind of travel across the United States go to comic book stores or costume shops or haunted houses. And that's where I had my first, what I'd say, convention icon encounter was with Kane Hodder. I had the Todd McFarlane Movie Maniacs action figure with me. He absolutely loved it. I have this awesome picture of where he's like, all right, he puts his arm around me, and then he says to the assistant, I'll let you know when to take the picture. Assistant says he's ready, and then Kane says go, and as he says go, he lifts me off the ground by about 5 inches, and the panic on my face was probably more than enough to geek everybody else around. The other encounter that I was going to say was I went to the Days of the Dead, which is over there over just outside of Pittsburgh in Monroeville, and it's about the Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And I know someone that was inside the movie, the remake of Night of the Living Dead from 1990. He plays the trucker zombie at the beginning, and it's really cool. And he's hey, Justin, it's Greg from Ohio again. I guess it can't be a bench if I don't bench myself on your show, too. So there I go. But yeah, his name is Dirk Ashton. He played the trucker zombie or truck zombie. So he's the gentleman at the beginning of the movie, when Patricia, Barbara, whatever, she's approaching the farmhouse, and there's that gentleman that's in the business suit, and he's walking right down the middle of the road, and she runs him over. Again, such a super nice guy, and he's really good friends with Tom Savini. So people told me that Tom Savini can kind of be a little harsh on the scene. So fortunately, I have Dirk as my in, because I had him as a college professor. And again, really neat guy. And so it was a joy seeing him at the convention, because it was the first convention for horror movies that he had ever went to. And he felt like he was being very spoiled. And so, by all means, if you wanted a photo, I can share both those photos with you. Otherwise, I can't wait to hear the episode and hear other people's convention encounters, because they'll probably be much cooler than mine. But that's okay, because I hold mine very close to the vest. So, all right, well, can't wait to hear the episode, and hope all is well. We'll talk at you later.
Greg, thank you so much for calling in, man. I love your voicemails on LOTC. And of course, you had to get benched here just like you always do over there. That's what they refer to as, because the voicemail thing here that we use, I use the same one that Greg employs over at Land of the Creeps. It has a time limit on each message. So if it's a longer thing, people have to call in. And of course, I cut it together there. But benching is what they call it when you run out of time in the middle of a story and then you have to call back in to finish it. And I've heard some of yours, Greg, that'll go over like 3 or 4 calls. It's just so great, man. Your enthusiasm is tremendous. Great stories here too. Kane is a real institution, a fixture out there on the convention circuit. And he's famous for giving everyone all the attention that he can, whether it's on the convention floor or it's at the bar afterwards, or he just loves to hang out. When I see Kane at the shows, we rarely have time to really converse during the event, because there's usually lines and photo ops and all this other stuff happening. But afterwards, when we're just having dinner somewhere or hanging out at the bars, when it's nice to catch up with people. And Kane is reliably wonderful and upbeat all the time. The last time we hung out was at an event in Chicago last year that I was at, helping my friend Bill Gibson with his Christine movie car. And Kane and I were just there talking about real estate for a while. He's also famous for taking photos with fans where he's choking them out or something like that. It's great that he picked you up. He's a powerful dude, and also one of the sweetest people on the earth. So that's cool you got that interaction with him. And that Dirk Austin story is great. Seeing someone on their first appearance is such a cool thing. And people in that realm, like Night of the Living Dead, that never felt like celebrities because George would just pull locals in, right, to appear in his movies. And I've had, I worked on a magazine celebrating the anniversary of Night of the Living Dead some years ago for Phantasm Media. That's Fantasm. And I interviewed a few of the people who were some of the zombie or ghoul extras in that film. And all of them were just floored by the endurance of that movie, its legacy, the celebrity of Romero and all that he became, and having been part of something that's now considered one of the greatest cinematic works of art of all time. That's so cool that you got to meet him on his first appearance. That's a real treasure. And then also those things outside of conventions too. That's something that most cities do. It's kind of like when WrestleMania rolls into a town. You can count on a bunch of different wrestling events and speaking engagements and even some different maybe mini conventions that crop up around an event like WrestleMania every year. It's the same thing in the horror realm. Oftentimes where, especially when it's in the fall, it's so cool to go into a town and at night there's no reason not to track down whatever the local haunted attraction is or something like that. Why not see the sights a little bit? Convention centers generally feel the same, no matter where you are or what the event is, but it's around the convention center. You know, hit those shops, support those local store owners and things so you can feed the local economy outside of just the convention itself. And then also find the collector's stores where they have movies and memorabilia and things like that. And then those haunted attractions, like I mentioned. That's a lot of the joy in that. And you mentioned a little bit about Savini. Man, as much as I respect him, I will never forget when I was at, I think it was Days of the Dead. Well, I was a part of one of those. I don't know, this is many years ago. And I think it was maybe Indianapolis or something. And my table was right across from Tom Savini, who was right next to Roddy Piper. And speaking of WrestleMania, speaking of wrestling, I'm a huge Piper fan, and that was the first time that Roddy and I had met. And I ended up actually years later, here's back to Rock and Shock, I did a panel with just me and Roddy on stage for over an hour in what turned out to be one of his final convention appearances. And he and I had this amazing discussion about his career, and it got real cerebral. It got, there was a lot of heartfelt discussion in there. And you could tell that he was at a really reflective moment in his life at that point. That is one of my all-time favorite panels that I've ever been a part of. Just the two of us up there, just talking about his world and the challenges he faced and how he overcame them. And then we got into, of course, the meat and potatoes elements of some of his favorite matches over time. But that was really cool. But I bring him up because here I had this great perspective, literally across the aisle from Savini on the right and Piper on the left. And if you go to conventions, Sundays are the days when everything winds down. In fact, at many of these events, the celebrities don't all hang around all day because they have flights to catch and whatever. And on this Sunday, there were lines for Piper nonstop throughout. So he was busy from top to bottom as soon as he got to the convention through to when he left. Savini, on the other hand, didn't have much of a line on this Sunday. People would come up periodically, of course, you know how it goes, just sprinkled throughout the day. But I'm watching Piper interacting with people, and then I'm seeing how Savini interacts with people. It got to maybe early afternoon, so maybe 3 or so hours before the convention was to close, and this kid rolled up to Savini in a wheelchair. And Tom had already started packing up his stuff. So he has a table that, you know how these things are always laid out with a bunch of different 8x10s and stuff like that. Tom was starting to pack those things up. And this kid rolled up to him in his electric wheelchair and asked him if he could buy a photo and get a signature from him. And Tom said that, nah, sorry, buddy, I'm packing up. So the kid then made a line directly over into Roddy Piper's queue. Piper spent so much time with everyone all weekend long. He was giving everyone just so much time, which is partly why his line was queuing all the time like it was. But that's the kind of interaction that we want. That's the kind of thing that the fans are looking for when they go to these shows. And especially if you're paying someone for a signature, that extra touch that you guys have been talking about in these voicemails is the most precious thing, right? It really is. So I see Piper spending all this time with these people. Here, this kid just got shut down by Savini, who really still had hours left in the day. I don't know if he had a flight that he was catching. He was still there at the end of the show that day. He didn't leave his table. It wasn't like he was heading out the door. But this kid eventually ends up with Piper, and Roddy could not have been cooler with him. I was just amazed at his connection with this young man. And Roddy had said that he has a buddy whose kid had a chair that was very similar to his, this electric wheelchair thing. And they were talking about how you can actually hit the knob and pop a little bit of a wheelie on it. And Roddy took off his coat. He had his hot rod leather jacket on, and he put it on the kid so he could wear it. Took pictures with him and everything. Didn't charge anything extra for the pictures. It was just the most heartwarming interaction. And then on the other side of that is Savini sitting there kind of like a curmudgeon, having just told this kid to take a hike. It was something else. So you really do encounter all kinds at these shows, and not every interaction is great. That's just the fact of the matter, is that's not always going to be the case. But in this case, for this young man, Roddy Piper was the hero of the day, and he was an amazing guy who did this stuff the right way. So thank you so much for calling in, Greg. Great to hear from you, man, and I appreciate you dialing into the show. And hopefully I'll be connecting with you on an episode of LOTC in the near future.
Hey, Justin, this is Brian Clark calling in to tell you about my favorite celebrity encounters. They both happened at Crypticon, Minneapolis in 2019. I dragged the whole family up there because I wanted to meet Caroline Monroe. I was very excited that she was doing a show close enough that I could get to. And I stood in line at her table, and Terry and the kids had moved on to look at something at another vendor. And so after she signed my At the Earth's Core one sheet as Princess Dia, which was delightful in itself, we stood and talked for a while. She really took time to make every interaction special. It wasn't just in the assembly line that everyone's kind of gotten used to. She asked questions. She wanted to get to know the people who wanted to get to know her. And she had seen us walk in together. And so after she and I took a picture together, she said, "Is that your family over there?" And I said, "Yes, that's them." She said, "Well, we got to get them over here to do a picture too." And in the days where everyone is now charging an extra $40 to take a single selfie, not only did she talk to me for a good 15 minutes and take a picture with me, she insisted that the family come over, and she asked everyone their names and got to know them a little bit and took even more pictures with everyone together, and that was fantastic. The second person we went up to meet was Doug Bradley, and I was a little concerned because I'd heard he could be kind of spiky sometimes at conventions, but my youngest daughter, Isabella, at the time was really into modifying Monster High dolls, making custom dolls, and she had made a Cenobite doll. So she'd taken a Monster High figure, stripped it down, repainted it, redid the clothes, drew the grid on the head, stuck a bunch of picture framing nails through plastic to make the pins, and she had it sitting on her shoulder with its legs under her purse strap so it would sit up. And when we got to our spot in line, Doug sort of jumped, made like the doll had frightened him, and so he was asking all sorts of questions about, "Did you make that yourself? That's really cool." Really taking the time to engage with her. And we asked, "Did you glue all those pins on there?" And she said, "No, I just stabbed them into the head." And that really cracked him up. So he asked her to come back behind the table and had his assistant come out with his personal phone to take a picture, which to this day she still says every once in a while, "Isn't it weird that Doug Bradley has a picture of me on his phone?" Which out of context might be kind of a questionable sentence. But later because I bought a couple of photos and got something autographed as a gift for a friend as well, I went back and looked at the charge. Not only did he not charge to take a photo with him, he also didn't even charge her for her autographed picture, which was pretty great in itself. Before Doug started his Q&A, he called out Isabella, because we were sitting right in the front row. He said, "Everyone, I want you to meet this wonderful young woman who made this incredible doll and just absolutely made my day. Stand up, Isabella, and show everyone." And he made her get up and show, and the room was absolutely packed wall to wall too. So she was pretty thrilled that Pinhead himself took some time out of his day and took some of the attention away from him to give to her. And so those are my two favorite celebrity interactions. Love the show, and hope to talk to you in person again soon. Bye.
Brian, thank you so much for calling in, man. Great to hear from you, as always. Brian and I were next to each other at Halloween-a-Palooza back in October and had just the best time. When it would slow down, we got the chance to chat it up about all sorts of things, movies, books, Godzilla. I mean, Brian is the biggest kaiju Godzilla fan that I know, and it's always a delight to see you, man. And these stories are amazing. Doug Bradley comes up again on this episode. He is genuinely one of the best out there, one of the best ambassadors for the genre, famous for his interactions with fans, just like what you guys experienced. And how cool for her at that young age to have her art acknowledged by someone that she admires, right? These shows, also, that's another element to the convention world, are all of the people who were there as vendors. We have the celebrities, but these tables and booths, people spend money to have a table at a show. And then they're there exhibiting and selling their work, their art. And I've discovered so many amazing artists through that, through just wandering the aisles at conventions. And for him to acknowledge that, especially to that Q&A crowd, is just amazing. Thank you, Brian, for calling in with that story. So good, so good.
Hey, everybody, Brian here, and I want to say, hi, Justin. How are you? It's great seeing you at Halloween-a-Palooza. Hope we get to hang out soon. I have a couple, if that's okay. And if it's not okay, well, he can cut off the message. First one is meeting Joe Bob Briggs and Darcy the Mail Girl in Burlington, Iowa, thanks to my friends at the Capitol Theater, the Somm, and Tadgood especially. Funny thing is, I bought 4 tickets to the show because I thought I was buying front row and actually bought back row. But the Capitol Theater was nice enough to let me move some tickets up front. So I took my son, my friend Jason, my son's friend Xavier, and myself, and we saw How Rednecks Saved Hollywood. But the funny part of that is, meeting Joe Bob, I had a letter that they've read on the show, The Last Drive-In, and I go up, and he asks my name, and Darcy kind of elbows him and says, you know who that is. That's Brian. He tweets us on Twitter and Instagram, and we've talked about him while we were in Burlington. My second one is my daughter, who is 6. Her first celebrity meet happened in Detroit, or actually outside Detroit, in Novi, last year. Took my letter again to meet Felissa Rose, who's on The Last Drive-In all the time. And it was Finley, my daughter's first celebrity, first convention. And Felissa just was amazing. She was almost in tears reading the letter and giving Finley a hug. And just, I know I will probably never top that for Finley if she remembers it. And if she doesn't, I can go back and tell her that story. And then the last one is meeting Joe Bob again at Flashback in Chicago last year. And I got in trouble because I had taken pictures with Joe Bob. And Finley found out that I was there and she wasn't. So I got in trouble, and I'd met Joe Bob a couple times that weekend and gotten several autographs. An autograph I donated to a charity event for my friend Andy that passed away. A lot of people's friend Andy that passed away, for his wife, to raise some money to help her. So I got an autograph for that. And I got several other autographs from Joe Bob that weekend. The coolest part was towards the end of the day on Sunday, I went over to get my last autograph, and I said, can you do me a favor? I'll pay you however much you want. You can tell me no. I just need you to record a little video to Finley telling her hi and that you understand why she's mad that I didn't bring her to the show. And he did that. He didn't charge me anything. But I've had some amazing experiences with celebrities. And I could probably come on, a podcast and talk about all the great meetings.
Brian, you got cut off there. Sorry about that. You can always call back in to finish the messages. It's certainly as many times as you want. You always have great stories. It was really wonderful seeing you at Halloween-a-Palooza. Again, thank you so much for your help. I was flying solo at that one, and certainly really meant a lot for you to be there with me all weekend long. Always a treat. Joe Bob and Darcy, gosh, they have really become staples out there on the convention circuit. And I'm glad that you've developed the friendship that you have with them and that these repeated interactions have always been so positive. Felissa is one of the most consistently amazing people out there as well. She's omnipresent on the circuit, and everybody, it's like I was talking about with Piper, where she's famous for taking time with people, so much time. She loves kids. She's a great mom, and so she really plugs into the family element whenever she has that kind of opportunity. And amazing that Finley had the interaction she did there. Thank you, as always, for calling in. And next time, don't forget, you can always call back and leave more messages to finish your story, Brian. Hope to see you again soon.
JB, Gregor Mortis. Favorite celebrity interactions at a convention. I think the first one I would talk about would not be necessarily a convention, but would be, of course, the great Jamie Lee Curtis. Meeting her at a Barnes and Noble's kid signing would definitely be high on my list, and her going out of her way to make me feel so embarrassed but so loved, and then taking a picture of my tattoo of her on my arm, and then it showing up on Jay Leno like the next day or two or whatever it was insane. That would definitely be number one on the list. But I've met so many great people, man. I've had so many great interactions. I've had a few bad ones, but most of them have been positive. Tom Atkins was an amazing person to meet in person, and God, there's been so many. Probably Jamie Lee being the number one, man, because that was one. John Carpenter, when I first got to meet him for the first and only time I've met him, was a great interaction. It was kind of quick, but still, it was really cool. So yeah, those, meeting Bill Mosley's always amazing. I've met him a few times, so Bill's always gracious. The late Sid Haig was awesome. Being able to meet Tony Todd, who we just lost recently, he was always great as well. So man, I've always had a really pretty positive, outcome. Dee Wallace, we just recently met him. Pearl and I went with a few from the group. We met her, and she was awesome. So I can honestly say, dude, those are my favorites, man. Just seeing those people. Tyler Maine was always a big one. Michael Barrett, and like, dude, I could go on forever. I can't really, so I won't bore everybody, but, Jamie Lee Curtis would be my number one, man. Just seeing her reaction when she saw my arm, and I've got her tattooed on my inside arm, and just seeing her eyes and the way she said a curse word in front of all these little kids was classic, dude. The F-bomb dropped, and I'm like, oh, it's so good. So anyways, man, appreciate you, JB. You know that, man. Love you, dude. Appreciate the show. And loving the new show too. Give me one more. So yeah. Is that the name of it now? I done forgot the name of your show, man. Dang. That sounds stupid. But I love your new podcast, dude. I went and listened to 2 episodes and it was great. So I'm going to sign out of here, buddy. I love you. You know that. Brother from another mother. Until next time, Gregor Mortis signing out. Peace.
Gregor Mortis, always great to hear from you. And thank you for calling in. JLC, Jamie Lee Curtis. Man, I was at the convention where she was part of Horror Hound. And I was there on behalf of, at that time I was working with Trancas and the charity that Malik and I had founded. And so I got to see the chaos, the madness all weekend long. And they put me in the room with all the Halloween people. They really tried to bring everyone in that they could. And it was an amazing experience. And that was another case of, Jamie Lee had said she was going to do one convention and that was going to be it. One and done. And she made sure that everybody who had pre-purchased tickets to meet her had the kind of opportunity that you had at that Barnes & Noble, where everyone felt like they got a chance to really talk with her, to plug in with her. And it took forever. She was there after hours signing. The show had closed down and she was still working through her queue, but she didn't want to let anyone down. And I found that to be the case with her when she was part of our charity event one year for Scare Foundation. And she was working the room, talking with everyone, so open and funny and sweet. And that blue sense of humor, boy, backstage before we went out for the formal presentation part of the night, we were all backstage just talking it up. And she was regaling the room with stories and just, talking blue as a sailor, as they used to say. So fucking funny. So great. And for your tattoo to then end up on Jay Leno, what an unforgettable moment for you. And a lot of those other guys, those are all real heavy hitters that were out there for a long time. Bill and Sid often put side by side because of their relationship through Rob's films and stuff. But Sid was a guy who was opposed to raising prices out there in the convention world, which have now skyrocketed. I can't believe how these things are broken down price-wise now. And all the different add-ons, like if you want to have a poster signed by someone, and if you want them to write the name of their character from the movie, they charge you an extra $20 for that now. Well, Sid stuck to the same price for his signature from beginning to end and never made it a point to try to bilk more money out of everyone. Total respect for him. And Bill he's out there too, having so much fun to this day doing these appearances in addition to all of his film work. Tony Todd, R.I.P., Dee Wallace and Tyler, they're also long-haul truckers on the convention road and giving fans amazing experiences all around. Thank you, Greg, too, for checking out Get Me Another. That podcast is so much fun, and I'm glad you've been enjoying those episodes. I love when you were texting me about digging into some of those on the Friday the 13th cycle that we're doing, and I'm glad you're liking it, man. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Definitely, eternally a brother from another mother. And I'll catch up with you soon, man. Thanks again. And I got one email that came in to radiohourpod@gmail.com from Elizabeth Portwood that reads as follows. Hi, Justin. You won't remember this, but 10 years ago, I met you and Tamara Glynn at Horror Hound in Ohio. I didn't really get to talk to you, unfortunately, but was able to hang out with Tamara for a bit. She was super nice and let me take 1,000,000 pics to get the shot. She kept in touch with me for a little while after the convention and wanted the scoop on how I got my teeth so white. The more involved she got on social media, the less I heard from her, but that is okay. She was so sweet, and it was a great experience. In 2019, at Horror Hound in Ohio, I met PJ Souls. She hugged me and told me that I had a glow about me. I think that was one of the best compliments I have ever received from a stranger. I hope she was seeing my kindness shine through and wasn't talking about my sweaty face from being in a packed convention and being so nervous. I also met Tony Todd at that convention. He had such a kind smile and was so tall. I was with a friend, and he asked us if we were married. We laughed and said no, to which he replied, "Well, you should be." That has been a long-standing joke between us since. Long-standing if you consider 5 years long. So sad to see of his passing. I don't have any great stories, but they are mine and made me happy. Have a great night. I love that, Elizabeth. Tamara, back at Horror Hound, I'll never forget that weekend. That was another one where I was there with my buddy Bill in his Christine car, and I think I had a table 2 where I was selling magazines and like Fangos and stuff like that. But I was right by Tamara, and Tam and I go way back. I mean, at the very beginning, before she knew about this whole fan world about Halloween 5, she and I connected and became very quick friends. And I ended up doing her film festival in Hot Springs, Arkansas a couple of times, which was always a lot of fun. And a lot of connections I made there, a lot of friends that remain friends to this day, like the Levy brothers, who were on this last episode, I guess a couple episodes ago here on the Radio Hour. That was one of the cementing experiences for us in terms of our friendship that has certainly endured. And Tamara's wonderful. I mean, it was so cool to see her embrace the fan base that's out there. And I know she's had some ups and downs with it, including one crazy guy who continues to harass her for whatever reasons. But overall, I think that it's been so cool to see her enter the fan realm and have the opportunity to interact with people. And I'm glad that was so positive. And same with PJ and Tony Todd. These are unforgettable moments. And I really appreciate you writing in to share those, Elizabeth. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me at justinbeahm.com, where you can sign up for the email notification list anytime I put a post up there. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and I look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode of the Radio Hour. Be good to yourself and to each other.
You have been listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour. The Radio Hour is a production of Reverend Entertainment, copyright 2024. All rights reserved.